The Aqualish look like they have a face only a mother will love. Their faces are all tusks and jowls, giving them a walrus-like look that really doesn't go well with their bald heads and colored skin. But they evolved to look that way because they come from the harsh ocean world of Ando. Because of their circumstances on that planet, they evolved to handle long spells in the water, but could also spend most of their time on land. However, their biology could also come in a few distinct forms, depending on their subtypes. The Aquala have broad two-fingered hands that are great for life in the water. Meanwhile, the Quara have 5 fingers and are more at home on land and with tools. The rarer Ualak have 4 eyes set above a mouth full of short tusks. Across these groups, eyesight is often poor, so hearing and raw toughness do a lot of the work. Their history is also full of internal strife. Rivalries between the Aquala and Quara fueled wars that spilled across Ando seas and cities. As such, off-worlders learned to be careful around them, since many Aqualish carry that fighting spirit into space. During the Clone Wars, Ando produced loud voices for the Separatists and plenty of muscle for anyone who paid. That's why Aqualish could often be seen working as mercenaries in cantinas all over the Outer Rim. That said, you can spot a few famous Aqualish in the galaxy. Ponda Baba was the thug who lost an arm to Obi-Wan in Mos Eisley. Meanwhile, Po Nudo was a Separatist senator who backed Dooku and sat on the Confederacy's ruling council. You might be familiar with Pong Krell. Yeah, no one really likes him. As much as everyone hates him though, he's not entirely representative of his species, the Basilisk. The name of the species obviously suggests that the Basilisk are lizard people. They're built rather bulky and musculous, sporting extra arms that act as support appendages for their main arms. Males have 4 arms, whereas females can have as many as 8. The extra appendages require the Basilisk to have a strong metabolism, which explains their robust frames. They can even store food and water for days, a trait they develop due to the harshness of their cold planet. And because of how harsh their home planet of Ojom is, the Basilisk couldn't develop any large cities, often relying on smaller communities instead. Their people are said to be quite friendly and adventurous overall, though. They love taking risks and traveling the galaxy, looking for thrills. In fact, employers don't like hiring Basilisks because if they feel bored in their job, they simply go AWOL and walk off without even a notice. And the underworld doesn't exactly like Basilisks because they're known for having loose lips that love spreading gossip. A good example of that is Dexter Jetster, the owner of Dex's Diner in Coruscant and one of my favorite Glub Shittos. Except for Ben Quardenaros, that is. Oh, Ben, never change. Anyways, Dexter is known for his friendship with Obi-Wan Kenobi and helping him track the origin of Jango Fett's dart to Kamino. Also, as mentioned before, Krell is also a Basilisk. Yeah, we still don't like him. If anyone is unaware, though, as to why he's one of the most disliked people in the fandom, he was a Jedi General during the Clone Wars and known for one of the highest death tolls of his clones in battle. On Umbara, he does everything in his power to send his troops on dangerous missions that are actively seeking to get them killed. Also, he almost had 5s executed. That's why everyone was very glad when he eventually got killed. The Bith might be the closest thing to your conventional definition of what an alien looks like, or just how the alien emoji looks. Similar to these gray aliens, they have large heads, small mouths, noseless faces, long fingers, and large dark eyes. But instead of gray skin, they come in different shades of pale pink, red, and yellow. But while they look humanoid, their biology is very different from humans. Bith exhaled through their skin and only have 1 lung. Their eyes, as big as they are, can see microscopic details on nearby objects. The trade-off, however, is that they are extremely nearsighted, making them bad pilots. Their ears are also so sensitive that sonic grenades make them feel like their heads are exploding. The Bith are native to the planet Clactor 7, a planet with a long history that dates back millions of years. Their planet's long history is the reason the Bith are considered one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. However, their planet suffered an ecological disaster long ago because of a chemical war. As such, the surviving Bith of the planet live in domed cities. The war that destroyed much of their planet also brought out the natural pacifist side of the Bith species. Meanwhile, some of them left the planet and lived in other worlds, becoming fully adapted to a civilized, high-technology lifestyle. Thanks to their intelligence and keen eyes, the Bith are known for their proficiency in art, science, music, and engineering. They're also known as peace-loving people who prefer to indulge in art and music instead of engaging in warfare and trade. For movie watchers, the most famous Bith are the ones you saw playing that repetitive music in the cantina on Tatooine in the first Star Wars movie. But for fans of the lore, you might be familiar with Darth Tenebris, the Bith Sith Lord who also served as Darth Plagueis' indirect creator and Sith Master. Most of you may be familiar with Bothans because they were once mentioned in Return of the Jedi.
Many Bothans died to bring us this information.
And were never mentioned ever again after that. But we can thank them for their bravery, or else the rebels wouldn't have gained intel on the second Death Star. That's why Bothans are often called the unsung heroes of the rebellion. But for those of you wondering what Bothans are, these are mammalian people who hail from Botawai and other colonies. They are barely 5 feet tall and are known to have animal-like features. Bothans differ in appearance because they can be canine, feline, or equine in terms of their body structure. Whatever the case, they're all covered in fur, which actually ripples in response to their emotional state. Weirdly enough, Bothans could actually interbreed with humans, making them a furry's dream partner. Meanwhile, Bothan culture is guided by the Way, which focuses on the pursuit of power and influence. That is why they're known for pursuing their individual success and accomplishments over anything else, especially when it comes to economic and political success. Due to this, backstabbing and betrayals were quite common among Bothans, making them unworthy of trust. These qualities also make them ideal politicians and spies. But while Bothans were red flags due to their selfishness, it was surprising that many of them aligned themselves with the rebellion instead of the Empire during the Imperial era. Einstein has some serious competition, because the Sarians are no joke when it comes to brains, both literally and figuratively. These near-human people are easy to spot because of their tall, conical skulls. And their heads aren't just for show, because the Sarians actually have binary brains that allow them to juggle ideas quickly while staying calm and thoughtful. That's why they're incredibly dignified and logical instead of fierce. These people came from Saria, which is known for being very peaceful due to the logical nature of the Sarians. Their leaders formed a council of elders that limited off-world technology to protect farms and open land. But as peaceful as the Sarians may be, not everyone agreed with that plan, which led to clashes between traditionalists and people who wanted more modern tools. Outside powers tried to sway those debates, and trouble reached the planet more than once as the Republic's crises grew. Meanwhile, their family life reflects a hard truth about their biology. Male births are rare, so society allows a respected man to have multiple wives in order to keep the population steady. The setup is formal and heavily guided by custom, with the community's needs put ahead of personal drama. On the bright side, they tend to live long lives, somewhere around a century or so, allowing them to breed multiple times in a single lifespan. That fact explains why there's a small loophole within the Jedi Order in relation to Sarian Jedi. Ki-Adi-Mundi, the most prominent member of this species, may be a Jedi Master and an esteemed member of the Jedi High Council. But he was allowed to take not just one, not two, but multiple wives because of the Sarian people's need to propagate as a species. Now, if only Anakin were Sarian, he wouldn't have to hide his marriage to Padme. The Chiss were a humanoid species with blue skin and red eyes. They came from Casilla, one of the many planets in the unknown regions of the galaxy, largely untouched by the Republic or the Empire. This is a cold and isolated planet and was thus perfect for the isolationist society of the Chiss. They were originally humans who ventured deep into space and had to settle on Casilla. Through thousands of generations of adaptive evolution, the Chiss came about as a result of humans needing to be resilient enough to survive this planet, adapting blue skins and red eyes. The Chiss society is built up in a hierarchical structure. They're ruled by the Chiss Ascendancy, which is made up of 4 noble families known as ruling houses. Although these families weren't referring to biological families, but rather the Chiss's place in the society. Each newborn Chiss would then be affiliated into one of these 4 ruling houses, which should determine his role when growing up. However, this wasn't as much of a determining factor as it sounds like, as any Chiss was still allowed to change his position, no matter which house he belonged to. They spoke their own language called Chun, which other species in the galaxy struggled to pronounce correctly, and most couldn't understand it either. The most famous Chiss by far is Grand Admiral Thrawn, born as Mithra Neruodo, which is his name in the Chiss tongue, he's a military genius who ascended through the ranks of the Chiss because of his exceptional mind. He's one of the very few Chiss to ever leave the Ascendancy and allied himself with the Empire as he saw it necessary to have a strong empire to fend off the greater threats to the galaxy, that would be the Vujon Vong. He quickly rose through the ranks, becoming Grand Admiral, and was then sent on a mission to investigate the unknown regions in the EU, or was banished by Ezra in the Disney canon, making him miss the events of the original trilogy. In both continuities, he returns after the fall of the Empire and attempts to rebuild it as the cunning and brilliant war tactician that he is. For the longest time, due to Thrawn, most people thought that all Chiss would be similar in demeanor and thinking to him. However, Thrawn turned out to be an exceptional being, even amongst the Chiss, and most of them had very individual personalities. Maybe Satan was never a demon after all. Perhaps he was just a Devaronian, who crash-landed on Earth and turned into the devil himself. Whatever the case, Devaronians are basically demon-looking people who live on the planet Devaron. But it's important to note that male Devaronians are very different from their female counterparts. Males are your classic demons in the sense that they have red skin and large horns jutting out of their foreheads. There's a good reason they evolved horns, as Devaronian males were the protectors of their people in their harsh homeworld, where predatory birds often hunted them. These horns served as their first line of protection. They even have sharp teeth to complete their scary looks. Males are also considered brutish, brash, and very aggressive. Some species even feel uncomfortable being around a male Devaronian. On the other hand, females are docile, non-aggressive, and logical. They're covered in thick fur that ranges from brown to white. Females are also more humanoid in the sense that they have no horns and have prominent canine teeth. And female Devaronians are often called to serve in politics and governance due to their more level-headed nature. But what is common between male and female Devaronians is their dense build, having strong muscles and bones. This makes them very capable fighters, as they're stronger and more resilient than most species. Devaronians are also known for their penchant for interstellar traveling, as they were some of the first people to learn how to travel from one star system to another. That's because male Devaronians are urged by their natural need to wander through the galaxy. There aren't a lot of prominent Devaronians in the galaxy, but Ezra Bridger was acquaintances with a certain Chikatro Vizago, a crime lord who ran the Broken Horn Syndicate on Lothal. While he's not the most pleasant personality, Vizago formed a good working relationship with Ezra and the Spectres, often trading information for services. The Dugs are guys who skip leg day a lot and only train their arms in the gym. At least that's what they look like. But Dugs, despite being smaller than most species, are actually quite strong and well-built people. These sentient beings can thank their planet Malastare for that. Their species adapted to their homeworld's high gravity, allowing them to develop these powerful arms. But while they move primarily using their arms, Dugs also have strong legs that they use for grappling and other fine motor manipulation. While they rarely walk on their legs, that doesn't mean they can't do so. Dugs have elongated snouts, sometimes with fleshy tendrils that make them look like they're trying to grow a mustache. They're also shorter than humans, barely taller than a human child. But like Chihuahuas, these short people have equally short tempers that make them very aggressive. This explains why they're often criminals or risk-takers when venturing out of their homeworld. But when they're back home, Dugs are nothing more than just laborers who worked for the Gran, the people responsible for colonizing Malastare. That's why you can't blame Dugs for having short tempers, as they've spent hundreds of years as second-class citizens on their own home planet. The most famous Dug is probably Sebulba, Anakin Skywalker's chief pod racing rival on Tatooine. He was considered unbeatable until Anakin defeated him on 32 BBY before leaving Tatooine to train as a Jedi. It's quite easy to spot a Duros from a distance. After all, these guys have huge volleyball-shaped heads, large red eyes, and long noseless faces.
I'd be careful where I was sticking my nose if I were you.
How ironic coming from the noseless guy, right? Their skin tone also catches the eye quite easily because it's either turquoise or a duller shade of bluish-green. These humanoid species come from the planet Duro, located in the core world of the galaxy. It was a heavily polluted world that the Duros abandoned, turning it into a ghost town that's mostly home to factories and food processing plants. As a result, these people had to live in different worlds all over the galaxy. earning their keep in different fields. Their species do come with a few advantages, as they tend to have better spatial awareness and reflexes than a regular human. Due to that, they were known to be great pilots. And because of that, many of them try to leave Duro and find an employment as a pilot. It is interesting to note that the Duros and the Neimoidians come from the same evolutionary line. The Duros were the original members of the line until the Neimoidians split off from them ages ago, becoming an entirely new species. The Duros also have a history rooted deep in space exploration. Way back, they were some of the first to develop hyperspace travel and find different lanes that run through Duro. For those members that didn't turn to piloting, some also turned to bounty hunting. Cad Bane was also a Duros and became the most skilled bounty hunter in the galaxy, known for his quick draw of the blaster. Although I do find it quite funny how everyone just kind of stops and accepts the challenge whenever Bane just stands there. Like, why not just shoot him when he's posing? The best way to get merchandise sales through the roof is by introducing teddy bear-like species. That's what the Ewoks are for. They look like they were built from a stuffed toy factory, looking like bear cubs walking on 2 feet. They're barely a meter tall and have large eyes and round faces that complete the cute look. But these small characters from the forest moon of Endor may look huggable and cuddly, but they were unwitting troublemakers who contributed to the destruction of the second Death Star. Natives to this moon, Ewoks are mostly an unknown species to much of the galaxy. Of course, because they were left unexposed to the mainstream galaxy, they're primitive creatures who rely on the forest for their homes and weapons. That's why they hardly use technology, not even knowing that C-3PO was a droid. But still, they were smart enough to use logs to build huge tree houses and platforms in the treetops. So yeah, despite being more primitive than most species, they actually have brains behind that furry cranium. During the Empire's temporary occupation of Endor, the Ewoks managed to give stormtroopers and Imperial walkers some trouble, because they were more attuned to their land and are incredibly talented at using whatever resources they could find. They're agile climbers, quick on their feet, and small enough to be hard to notice. This makes them great ambush attackers, especially in the dark of night. Just play Ewok Hunt in Battlefront 2 to get a sense of that. Culturally, Ewoks are tribal and deeply connected to nature. They live in tight-knit communities and tree villages and follow a spiritual belief system involving nature spirits and ancestral worship. They respect the forest and its balance, and they communicate using a language called Ewokese, which sounds like a mix of chirps, grunts, and enthusiastic gibberish. They celebrate victories and important events with loud music, dancing, and lots of drumming. Also, yes, they do eat people. Why shouldn't they? They are hunters after all, and cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Other species are just strangers to them, and they'd surely take an easy meal. The most famous Ewok in the galaxy is Wicket W. Warwick, who was the first to meet Princess Leia during the Battle of Endor. As a fun trivia as well, originally Ewoks were never supposed to be introduced, because George Lucas intended to use Wookiees instead. That's why the name Ewok is basically just a reverse of how you pronounce Wookiee. The Faline hail from the planet Faline, which is the same name as their species. Their world, an elegant planet known for its civilization and sophistication, symbolizes its people's ego. In the same way, the Faline are also known for their good looks, having great pride in that, and even building quite an ego around their looks. They have smooth green or teal reptilian skin, sharp facial features, and long black hair. The Faline can even alter their skin pigmentation and are able to release pheromones that make them attractive to any species coming in contact with these pheromones. They were also half aquatic and could hold their breath underwater for a long time. On top of that, the Faline have reflexes quicker than most species, making them capable fighters. Their culture, however, is known to be very cold due to their cold-blooded biology. That is why they hardly show emotions. Despite that, they're proud of their society, often calling their planet the real center of culture in the galaxy, often angering the citizens of Coruscant. This arrogance is why the Fallen are known for being isolationists, believing they are head and shoulders above everyone else in the galaxy. The Faline are best known for their being leaders of the Black Sun crime syndicate. Also, during the time of the Empire, due to assassination attempts on Darth Vader's life from Black Sun, hundreds of thousands of Faline were killed by the Empire on their planet in retaliation. Seemingly born to be mad scientists, the Fausts are a rare species of aliens who come from the planet Adana. They sometimes look like anemic humans who spent too long in their basement mixing chemicals, but they're an entirely different species that actually have distinct characteristics. The Fausts have pale blue skin, a double set of eyelids, and light-colored eyes. They're also lankier than humans, making them look like the perfect nerds. Fausts are also smarter than humans, often using their intelligence for evil and crazy stuff instead of trying to solve galactic hunger. The most prominent member of this species is Dr. Nuvo Vindi, who was obsessed with the formerly extinct Blue Shadow virus, which killed countless people many years before the Clone Wars. Upon recreating the virus, he turned it airborne to make it more dangerous. However, Vindi's plan ultimately failed when the Jedi and the Republic successfully captured him and contained the new Blue Shadow virus. If there were ever a species born to be grunts, that would be the Gamorreans. These are the guys you'd hire for good money to walk with you wherever you go, because no one's going to want to mess with large and stocky creatures that look like they're a cross between a pig and an orc from Lord of the Rings. However, not all Gamorreans share the same features. Usually they have greenish skin and huge frames that look like they had an entire gem in their mother's womb, but in some cases, Gamorreans can be skinny and have blackish or brownish skin. Still, they are often big and strong. That explains why most other species consider Gamorreans as mindless brutes. While they may not be the smartest people, Gamorreans are still sentient and have a certain measure of intelligence. Still, most of them aren't capable of speaking Galactic Basic due to their vocal apparatus. That's another reason other species think they're on the dumber side of the spectrum. Of course, there's also the issue of their aggression. Gamorreans are warring people who often go to war with rival clans instead of living in harmony under a clear and organized government system. Hence, it is rare for them to live past 45 years. Gamorreans are native to the planet Gamor, which is a green and agrarian planet in the Outer Rim. Often considered a pleasant planet because of its rich nature vibe, Gamor is, nonetheless, off the vacation plans for most interstellar travelers because no one wants to get caught between a war of two Gamorrean clans. But while they may not be smart, the Gamorreans' strength and ferocity make them ideal bodyguards for crime lords in the Outer Rim. Most notable are the two Gamorreans who once worked under Jabba the Hutt, and eventually Boba Fett. Unfortunately, both those guards saw their deaths during the Battle of Mos Espa in the Book of Boba Fett. Rest in peace. The Gand are native to the planet Gand, a world rich in ammonia. While it's not obvious at first, the Gand are actually insectoid people who are far nicer than other insectoid species in the galaxy. Their insectoid traits can be seen in their chitinous exoskeleton and large multifaceted eyes. Meanwhile, their mouths are rarely seen because they have to wear special breathing apparatuses to survive in other atmospheres. But it is believed they have no visible mouths. Meanwhile, their breathing masks often allow them to survive on oxygen-rich planets, as they evolved in an ammonia-based planet that's often toxic to other species. Still, there were other Gands who evolved through ritual to survive without these masks. Culturally, the Gand are known to be very humble. They speak in third person because it's widely believed in their culture that they have to earn the right to their individuality. As such, the right to use first-person pronouns was reserved for only the highest and most legendary members of their society. Meanwhile, the common Gand is known for being very polite and often sees himself as lower than other people. But it is also believed that being polite and humble allows the Gand to shape their identity enough to earn the right to say I. On the other hand, members of this species who mess up and live boisterous lives will have to live the rest of their lives nameless. One of the most unique aspects of Gand society is the tradition of Findsmen. Before they developed their technology, the Gand relied on the Findsmen to track criminals or lost items using spiritual rituals and hunting instincts. Even after developing space-age tech, they still use firearms in law enforcement. That's why the Gand are also hot commodities in bounty hunting circles. On a grander scale, the Gand rarely involve themselves with the rest of the galaxy out of fear of offending anyone. That's why there aren't a lot of prominent Gands outside their home planet. But when they actually incorporate themselves with the rest of the galaxy, the Gands become valuable in a lot of different fields because of their skills as Findsmen. The most prominent Gand was the bounty hunter Zuckuss, who was among the bounty hunters hired by Darth Vader to track down the Millennium Falcon. His story is also incredibly wholesome as his relationship with Forlom develops, and I've talked about it extensively in my bounty hunter video. Go check that out after this video. Finally, because one guy in the comments kept asking for him, I present to you Gaper Bingzoid. Who is this, you might wonder? He doesn't look like your average Star Wars alien, right? Well, that's because he isn't, and he's just a random meme from a TikToker which gave him the Glub Shido effect. Same goes for this friggin' guy, Jinky Minus. Now stop asking me for them! The Gendai are known to be an almost unkillable species and were considered some of the strongest species in the galaxy due to their unique physics and resiliency. What makes the Gendai unique is that they're essentially formless because of their lack of bones. The only distinct feature they have is their heads, which are bald and have mouths full of sharp teeth. But they're actually just a jumble of muscles and nerves connected together. That means they have to wear armor to give themselves a humanoid form. Owing to the fact that they lack bones and even vital organs, they can survive extreme injuries that would have killed other species. What makes them even harder to kill is that they can even regenerate their injuries, which means they're going to eventually heal even from complete obliteration of their body. On top of that, the Gendai can potentially live for thousands of years, making them essentially immortal as they can survive and regenerate from injuries, and also live almost indefinitely. But as powerful as the Gendai may be, they're generally peaceful people who want to attain perfection. That's why they often dive deep into their philosophy, which teaches that everything is essentially pointless due to the fact that everything changes. This philosophy is also one of the reasons they don't have a formal government. The Gendai even struggle to reproduce, which means there aren't a lot of these immortal people running around to take over the galaxy. Still, some Gendai become warriors. One such warrior is Ravis, the leader of a marauder group. He was mostly active during the High Republic era, where he earned his reputation as a Jedi killer, requiring numerous Jedi to subdue him. He was eventually killed during the Imperial era after crossing paths with Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, who gave him an honorable death via a beheading. Of course, there's also Dirge, one of, if not the strongest bounty hunter to have ever laid their hand on the bounty hunting profession. If the galaxy had an extra large bug spray, the Geonosians would have been extinct a lot earlier. These insectoid species are winged creatures native to the planet Geonosis, a hot, rocky world with occasional spire-like formations and barely any greenery. These spires were the hives of the Geonosians, where they lived in the underground. The Geonosians themselves stand tall and thin, with hard exoskeletons that give them their signature bony and skeletal look. Their mouths are filled with sharp teeth, allowing them to bite through tough material, even clone trooper armor. And with their ability to fly, Geonosians look like locusts who went to the gym and ate a lot of protein. But while they may look like primitive creatures that only fly and fight, Geonosians are actually incredibly intelligent, with a lot of them being responsible for various technological marvels. Their battle droid factories being only one of their many achievements. Another is the initial concepts of the Death Star, which were also made by them. Their hive society is very interesting. Where a caste system determines their roles, the queen stood up top of the hive, giving birth and laying the eggs for every single Geonosian. When a Geonosian is born, they get categorized and get a predetermined job. There were aristocrats, which organized and ruled over the hive and made up only 5% of a hive's population. Then there were the drones, which were in turn categorized into different tasks like warrior, pilot, or worker. Drones were nameless and considered widely replaceable in their society, often being mistreated by the aristocrats. During the Clone Wars, Archduke Poggle the Lesser is the highest aristocrat of the biggest Geonosian hive. Despite their hive-minded culture, Geonosian drones weren't just mindless creatures and could rise in the ranks should they perform well in the combat arena, and did also possess individuality. However, their queen always had the ability to overrule their individuality. She also had these brain worms that could control people and Geonosians alike. These worms could even bring dead Geonosians back to life, controlling their bodies and treating them like a galactic version of the Walking Dead. Sadly, most Geonosians were killed by the Empire, and Darth Vader himself killed their last queen. Thus, they're most likely extinct by the time of the Galactic Civil War. The Gran have some of the most unusual faces you can find in the galaxy, because they have goat-like snouts, bat-wing-like ears, and 3 tube-like eyes. That's not something you'd find in your goats on a farm. Still, the Gran evolved like that on their home planet of Kenyan for survival purposes. On their planet, they are grazers who only eat silver grass. As such, they evolved to have eyes like that so that they could easily spot their food, considering their eyes allow them to see more colors and read heat shifts. The same unique trait also allows them to sense emotions. In terms of their familiar structure, the Gran mate for life, with parents that are famously devoted. They live for companionship, with many Gran believing being alone is a nightmare for them. As such, the harshest form of punishment in their society is exile, forcing a Gran to live alone without a herd or a mate for the rest of their life. While the Gran are known to be peaceful people, they actually held real power during the final years of the Republic, with the planet Malastare holding a seat in the Senate. But as for the Gran from Kenyon, they were mostly isolationist people throughout most of their lives. However, during the rebellion, they did indeed aid the rebels by providing food. There aren't a lot of famous Grans. However, Ax Mo and Ask Ak were senators known for being members of the Senate's Loyalist Committee during the final years of the Republic. Naboo isn't home to just one sentient species. While the humans live in lush and thriving cities on the surface, the waters are home to the Gungans. These are amphibious alien species living in underwater cities. Due to their amphibious nature, Gungans have long limbs, floppy ears, and eye stalks on top of their heads. Their faces are also rubbery and flexible, giving them the ability to look goofy and fearsome, whichever way you may look at them. Meanwhile, their skin tones vary from earthy colors to brighter hues of red or orange, sprinkled with patterns that usually belong to frogs and fish. What makes Gungans special among most species is their ability to live normal lives on both the surface and in the water. They usually spend most of their time in their underwater cities thanks to their internal nostril flaps, but they're also perfectly adapted to life on the surface. Their long and powerful legs are suited for both underwater swimming and running on surfaces. Gungan culture is hierarchical, with a council of representatives handling their internal affairs. Sitting on top of this hierarchy is the boss, the political leaders of the Gungans. After the Battle of Naboo, the Gungans were allowed a seat in the Galactic Senate, with a representative handling the galactic affairs of these people alongside the human representative of Naboo. While Gungans may act and talk primitively, they are skilled engineers. For weaponry, though, they used energy-based weapons like the boomas and adlatls, which they had to throw by hand. They are also capable of crafting powerful energy shields capable of withstanding bombardment from Trade Federation AATs and MTTs. Their ingenuity can also be seen in their underwater city designs, which are all covered by a shield to keep the water out. Unlike most species in the galaxy who believe in the Force, the Gungans believe in something called the life current. This is often interpreted as their way of understanding the Force in nature, and their isolation from mainstream society for millennia may have allowed them to adopt their own version of the Force. The most infamous Gungan in the galaxy is undoubtedly General Tarple, who went 1 versus 1 with Grievous and friggin' won. Okay, we won't let that count. They did my boy Grievous dirty there. Another infamous Gungan is, of course, Jar Jar Binks. He eventually became the Gungan representative to the Galactic Republic and was manipulated into passing a motion granting then-Chancellor Sheev Palpatine the emergency powers he used to create a grand army for the Republic and to reconstruct the Galactic Republic into the Galactic Empire. But it was all part of his plan because, in truth, the true Sith Lord was him, Darth Jar Jar, who manipulated the events in the galaxy with his buffoonery to take control of the Empire. Long may Darth Jar Jar live! Imagine a group of people who look like humans, but have cheekbones for days. That's what you get with the Happens. Of course, they look as human as any human can be, except for the fact that they were made to be beautiful. This is tied to their long history. Their roots go back to the Laurel Raiders, pirates who slipped through the transitory mists and built a base in the Hapes cluster. The Raiders abducted beautiful human women and brought them home. Around 4050 BBY, the Jedi shattered the Raiders, and the women left behind took power. They swore no man would rule them and elevated a Queen Mother. A later Queen Mother sealed the borders, built the Royal Star Home, and expanded the Hapes Consortium. After millennia of isolation, the Happens finally opened their borders in 8 ABY. As such, generations of selective breeding made beauty the norm across their 63 worlds. They kept themselves isolated from the rest of the galaxy long enough that they were basically genetically different compared to baseline humans. Sure, they may look human, but they were essentially bred to be 1,000 times more beautiful than a Victoria's Secret model. But regular humans do have an advantage over them. Happens are known to be blind at night because they live on a planet of perpetual daylight. Even dim lighting is more than enough to render them blind. As far as their society is concerned, Happen life is proudly matriarchal. The Queen Mother rules from the Fountain Palace with a royal court of planetary representatives. Beauty and status are everything, and the upper classes are famous for their cold political games. But because of this, assassination attempts are all too normal. Choosing a royal consort is a high-stakes affair that pits noble houses against one another. Of course, there are men, but they often hold a lesser status. Due to that, some of them slip into piracy in the transitory mist. Notable happens include Ta'achum, a ruthless former Queen Mother, and Prince Isolder, who helped bridge Hapes and the wider galaxy. The Harch, who came from Secundus Ando, are arachnid humanoid people. They have all the physical traits of a spider. This means they have a tough exoskeleton that's often brown, black, or white. They also have 6 red eyes and 6 fully functional arms and 2 legs, making a total of 8 limbs. Some members of this species even inherit spinnerets or venoms, which are all spider-like traits. And unlike the common house spider that probably only has a few months to live, the Harch are said to be able to live for centuries, making them the scariest spiders in the galaxy. What makes the Harch scarier is that these are not mindless people. Instead, they have an organized civilization that's built around individualism and aggression. Their ruling people come from noble families that are skilled in diplomacy and social manipulation. In most cases, these families are focused on a militant ideology that tries to protect their homeworld. Harch language is also unique because it includes clicks and hisses, even when they're speaking Galactic Basic. One of the most well-known members of this species is Admiral Trench, a separatist admiral known for having survived numerous lethal encounters with the Galactic Republic. Trench is Admiral Yularen's arch-nemesis because he's known to have outsmarted the Republic Admiral a few times. Like actual insects who love to swarm new places, the Hutt, often called the Yamri, are a menace to the galaxy, not just because they're 7-foot-tall pests, but also because they're known for expanding their territory at the expense of other worlds. The Yamri are home to the planet Hutt. They are insectoid beings with tall, wiry frames, hard exoskeletons, and sharp, clawed limbs. Meanwhile, their eyes gave them nearly a 360-degree all-around vision. Their taste for expansion started to develop on their homeworld, where they were forced to become adaptive and industrious until they eventually dominated their entire planet. As such, their society required them to be logical, allowing them to survive through control. They eventually developed technological advancements that helped them expand their territories to other systems. And they had the audacity to say that these colonies were for the greater good, even though it was clear that the only beneficiaries were the Hutts. But their expansionist mindset eventually turned very violent when they decided to take over the planet Kali and enslave the natives, the Kalish. They were initially successful until they found out the hard way why the Kalish were known for being proud warriors. Led by a warrior who eventually became known as General Grievous, the Kalish successfully repelled the Hutt in a violent war. After turning to the Republic for help against the Kali and the Republic interventions, the Hutt didn't fully leave Kali, and still kept exploiting their people for their planet's resources. The Hutt species are giant space slugs with small eyes and arms, wide mouths, and thick bodies. Being without legs, the only way they could move was by using their powerful tails, but in most cases, they have people to carry them around on carriages wherever they go. Hutts are, of course, most widely known as gangsters in the galaxy. They're space mafias who control big sectors of the galaxy's underworld, including several systems and hyperspace lanes in the Outer Rim areas. Most of them come from the planet Nalhutta, a swampy and polluted world that matches the equally nasty looks of the Hutt species. But despite being slimy and kinda disgusting looking, Hutts were incredibly intelligent and influential, with a vast amount of resources at their disposal. In fact, they were so influential that they were often considered untouchable by the Republic and the Empire, and had to be considered their own ruling entity. Hutt culture is characterized by excess. They want everything in excess, whether it's power or money. That's why, even though the Hutts form a mafia-like group in the underworld, they're often rivals of one another in an effort to take more control and power. And most Hutts hold on to their power and territories for a long time, because they can live for centuries, sometimes even over 1,000 years. What most people don't know about Hutts is that they are hermaphrodites. That means they're neither male nor female because they possess both reproductive organs, but usually pick a gender to stick to. This allowed them to reproduce without a partner, giving birth to tiny slug-like babies like Rada. Also, they spoke their own tongue called Huttese mostly, but were also capable to speak in basic galactic standard as seen with Zero the Hutt. But most Hutts didn't feel the need to adapt their tongue to others and rather have the others adapt to them. Despite their shrewd nature and love of excess, Hutts were rarely violent themselves. They were actually rather calm when negotiating with people, having the violent actions be carried out by their subordinates. but most of them were ruthless and usually quite wealthy, thus they did like to see violence for their own entertainment. A lot of Hutts held rancors, which they saw as a status symbol to own such a dangerous pet, but also as a way to dispose of enemies in the most violent yet entertaining way possible. There's no doubt that the most prominent Hutt is Jabba the Hutt, a gangster who controlled Mos Eisley and much of Tatooine. And then there's Gardulla the Elder, the Hutt who once owned Shmi Skywalker, Anakin's mother. And finally, there's also Jabba the Human? Wait, who is that? The Iktochi are a species with pointed horns that give them a bull-like appearance, making them look somewhat aggressive. After all, no one wants to mess with someone with horns that can put an eye out, but the thing about the Iktochi is that they're actually calm and disciplined people. Hailing from the storm-racked moon of Iktoch, these horned humanoids developed strong and hardy bodies that allowed them to survive their planet's environment. That's why they have thick skin that protects them from harsh winds. Meanwhile, their hands are usually a lot bigger than human hands because of their need to be able to grip things while surviving the strong winds of their planets. As a result, they aren't gifted with dexterity, as their fingers tend to be bigger and fatter. Despite that, the Iktochi are known for their gift of precognition. This gift allows them to see the future or have a direct perception or knowledge of what's going to happen soon. While there's no telling whether or not this is connected to the Force, this served them well on their planet because they needed to be able to have a way of telling if a storm was coming. However, this ability weakened after they moved far from their homeworld. On top of that, Iktochi are naturally gifted in the Force, especially when it comes to their telepathic abilities. This makes them ideal for Jedi training, as they can easily use their natural giftedness to their advantage. The problem, however, is that these people are guided by tradition and family. That's why the Jedi Order has always been cautious about training a member of this species out of fear that their attachments to their traditions and their emotional tendencies could make them vulnerable to the dark side. Still, they are generally orderly and peaceful people who live simple lives. So, if an Iktochi did indeed receive Jedi training, they tend to become excellent Jedi, such as Saesee Tiin, a Jedi Master who served on the Jedi High Council during the final years of the Republic. Tiin was an excellent pilot, however, neither his piloting skills nor his precognition abilities helped him when he was one of the Jedi Masters who attempted to arrest Chancellor Palpatine. There was also Darth Cognis, the third in line of the Rule of Two, who even before becoming a Sith, always used her precognition abilities to help her in bounty hunting missions. If you like starfish and birds and want both at once, you might like the Ishi Tib. They are amphibious people from Tibrin with big eyes on stalks and sharp beak-like mouths. Their heads look a bit like five-pointed stars because of the eye stalks, beaks, and cheek pouches. Meanwhile, their lungs work as internal gills, and they can smell well on land or in water. As for their green skin, it's good at holding moisture, but they need a saltwater bath about every 30 hours, or their skin cracks and they die. Historically, the Ishi Tib grew from fish that leapt onto the coral reefs to escape predators. Think of them as people who were forced to evolve out of the water to survive. That's why their cities sit on those reefs, with underwater farms for fish, seaweed, and crustaceans. They also live in small communities called schools that can reach 10,000 people. Each school elects representatives for 1 year at a time. Their most important laws protect the environment, allowing them to live in harmony with nature. However, breeding is planned by the school, with eggs laid in hatcheries and children raised together to ensure maximum survival. In fact, marriage doesn't even exist within the society, and no one knows who their parents or children are. Due to the organized nature of these people, the Ishi Tib have a careful managerial streak. That's why many who leave Tibrin become executives, accountants, or project managers. They also have a primal side, and can be ferocious in a fight, tearing with their beaks. There are actually quite a few prominent members of this species. In fact, during the Clone Wars, Count Dooku pulled Tibrin into the Confederacy even while Senator Gume Sam still sat in the Galactic Senate. Many Ishi Tib also backed Dooku at first after he toppled the tyrant Cerebron II. Later, Hakahai made a name as a brutal criminal on Mimban in 19 BBY. You could spot an Ishi Tib in Jabba's palace, and 4 stood at the rebel briefing before the attack on the second Death Star. They're also a species you could pick in the 2015 Battlefront, and I found them to be the ugliest alien I've ever seen, hands down. The Ithorians are, funnily enough, nicknamed hammerheads by the common people due to their heads being shaped like a sideways hammer. Their posture also looked like they've been slouching on couches their entire lives, but while Ithorians aren't the prettiest people, they are a fascinating race. They're a gentle people hailing from the lush and wild world of Ithor, a planet rich in rainforests. Their close proximity to nature eventually led them to worship the greenery on their planet, so when they advanced far enough in technology, they built cities high in the atmosphere to ensure they didn't set foot on the planet's surface, believing their forests to be very sacred. Interestingly, Ithorians also came with 2 mouths on each side of the neck, so when they speak, they do so with 2 throats that come with different tones. This also allows them to unleash powerful sonic attacks that can burst even eardrums, or, if enhanced with the Force, bring down entire walls and buildings. But while they may look slow and tranquil, Ithorians aren't primitive. They're actually technologically advanced enough to build floating cities. They are also experts in sustainable development, capable of technology that allows them to thrive while preserving their ecosystem. Ithorians are also known for being rather curious, allowing them to venture into other star systems. Their adventurous ways have allowed them to become fully integrated with the rest of the galaxy independently or as part of their familial circles called herdships. And because Ithorians are peaceful, you'd hardly see them with a blaster, although there are obviously exceptions to that, as some did go into the bounty hunting business. Nevertheless, most Ithorians become diplomats, explorers, and navigators in different parts of the galaxy. Rarely seen without their signature brown robes, the Jawas are a small-figured species native to the desert planet Tatooine. The Jawas are known across the galaxy for their tinkering skills, making them some of the best scavengers around. No one really knows what a Jawa looks like, but they're often seen wearing brown robes from top to bottom, with only glowing yellow eyes peeking out from under the hood. There are various theories about their real appearance. These range from lizard-like creatures to rodents. Only thing we know for a fact is that they're hairy and furry. But while their appearance may be a mystery, what's not a mystery is their talent for scavenging. Jawas love going from one junk scrap to another to look for broken droids, rusted starship parts, or anything that looks like it could be worth a few credits. If someone needed spare parts, there's a good chance a group of Jawa may have in their massive vehicles called sandcrawlers, which are essentially moving junkyards. Shout out to the UCS Lego Sandcrawler at this point, what a beauty! The Jawas are also known for their language called Jawaese, which sounds like gibberish, but it's a language that's composed of squeaks, smells, and short barks. Utini being one that is frequently heard, which means as much as wow or hey. Jawas are also believed to be related to the Tusken Raiders, but they absolutely hated each other, as the Jawas often invade Tusken territory when rolling around the desert with their sandcrawlers. Interestingly, Jawas have a great sense of smell, a trait they use for identifying each other under their almost identical robes. Unlike most alien species in the galaxy, there aren't a lot of named Jawas. One famous member is Agile, though, who was actually a Jedi member during the Clone Wars and even spoke perfect Galactic Standard Basic. Born and bred to fight, the Kaleesh are known for their culture as proud warriors who only want to live and die for combat. They were a reptilian species with red skin, sharp-clawed fingers, and elongated snouts with sharp teeth. What made them most recognizable, though, was them wearing bone masks, which are sacred relics fashioned from the skulls of their enemies or ancestral beasts. There's also good reason the Kaleesh are known as warrior people. They were born on the planet Kali, which was marked by brutal wars throughout its history. Their people were often divided by tribes, who often fought against each other as well. However, despite their warrior ways, they all live moderately primitive lives distanced from any technology, rather using old-fashioned weapons like swords and spears instead of blasters. Nevertheless, the entire Kali culture was built on them living solely to become the strongest warriors. This is due in large part to one of their religious beliefs, where the best and strongest Kaleesh warriors ascend to godhood after death. The Kaleesh, however, eventually saw numerous adversaries throughout the galaxy. Chief among them were the Hutt, who were more technologically advanced and subjugated much of their world. Through a combined effort, however, and under the leadership of none other than the greatest Kali to have ever lived, Grievous, the Kaleesh drove the Hutt from their world. But because the Hutt had better relations with the Republic, the Kaleesh were sanctioned with heavy fines that drove their people to hunger and poverty. This eventually added more fuel to the Kaleesh's resentment against the Republic and their protectors, the Jedi Order. The most notorious member of this species is, as already mentioned before, Grievous, who was once the strongest of his people and had a legendary status among his people. He was the one to unite all the tribes and was able to finally drive the Hutt off their planet. However, when the Republic actions and the Jedi helped the Hutt, Grievous grew a deep hatred on them, swearing to get his revenge for the sake of his people. He joined the CIS, who helped his planet out of poverty, but was betrayed by Dooku, who wanted to have an obedient enforcer rather than a strong-willed warrior. In a fabricated accident, Grievous's body was destroyed, and he had to be transformed into a cyborg before then becoming the supreme commander of the Separatist armies. In that role, he was able to take revenge on the Jedi, hunting and killing them throughout the galaxy, while adding their lightsabers to his collection. The Kaminoans themselves were a tall, mysterious alien species living on a rainy planet that's mostly covered by an ocean. They're very slender, with necks so long they could probably see over your roof. Their skin is smooth and pale, close to the shade of white or gray with deep black eyes. Their head literally reminds me of the alien emoji. But while Kaminoans look like a cross between a classic alien and a giraffe, they were the leaders in genetic science. They lived on Kamino, which was once an unknown planet to much of the galaxy before the Clone Wars. But thanks to the secret efforts of the Sith Lords Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious, Kamino became one of the most important planets during the final days of the Galactic Republic. Only a few people know about their existence because they live outside the usual borders of the known galaxy in wild space, and don't usually venture off-world. The few who did know about them knew that they were expert cloners, capable of genetically engineering any being. Their expertise in cloning was at such a level that no one in the galaxy could easily replicate their work, even during the time of the Empire. Using their cloning tech, the Kaminoans created an army of millions of clone troopers, all engineered from Jango Fett's genes. They were battle-ready in a matter of years because of their rapid maturity and fast-paced training. These clones were also receptive to orders and were programmed to follow their superiors by the Kaminoans, even if it meant gunning down more than a few younglings during Order 66. As intelligent as Kaminoans may have been, they were said to be lacking in the empathy department. Their society was built on perfectionism, and they treated everything in that manner, be it themselves or the beings they created. If a Kaminoan citizen would go crazy, they'd see her as defective and terminate them to keep the high standard of their society up. This was reflected in their speech pattern, which was slow and void of emotions. Thus, they also treated their clones as products instead of living people, freeing themselves from any emotional attachments. But despite this cold and emotionally distant demeanor, Kaminoans are the literal calm in the storms, never seeming agitated and always remaining their polite and somewhat distant demeanor. Some of the most well-known Kaminoans include Lama Su, the Prime Minister of Kamino during the Clone Wars, as well as Nala Se, the chief scientist on Kamino who was responsible for most of the Jango Fett clones. Sadly, shortly after the rise of the Empire, Tipoca City, Kamino's main cloning center and science hub, was destroyed by the Empire in a bombardment, basically erasing most of the Kaminoans' cloning technology. A Carcharodon is what happens if the movie Jaws were made on land instead of water. That's because this species is literally a walking shark. They come from the ocean world of Carcharis, where they were allowed to evolve into tall, powerful, and muscular people. And because of their physical features, they are fearsome people. The Carcharodon basically have heads that are all teeth and instinct, with rows of sharp, replaceable fangs and strong jaws built for biting through tough prey. They have gill slits and can function in the water, but they also operate fine in air for long stretches, which lets them move between ocean and land without much trouble. Their keen senses also help them track movement and blood in the water. Of course, their ferocious nature is one of the reasons their history is tied to the galaxy's wars and to the conflicts of their home seas. Carcharodons ventured off Carcharis as hired muscle and scouts, and they gained a reputation for ruthless efficiency. During the Clone Wars, some aligned with the Separatists and fought in major undersea campaigns. Their skills made them natural shock troops in aquatic theaters and dangerous enforcers elsewhere. There's also the fact that Carcharodon society values strength, speed, and loyalty to the pod. Leadership usually goes to the strongest swimmer and the most fearless hunter. Many practice rite of passage trials in open water that test endurance and discipline. That's why scars are seen as proof of experience rather than shame. As for outsiders, things can get a bit complicated when dealing with the Carcharodon. Outsiders who show clear purpose and respect tend to get a direct, almost business-like welcome. Those who do not are sized up as prey. The most well-known member of this species is Riff Tamson, a separatist commander who led brutal operations in the seas of Mon Cala during the Clone Wars. Others from his species served as mercenaries, bodyguards, and pirates, and made their names by surviving dangerous work far from Karkaris. No, it's not a fashion statement. There's a reason Keldors wear breathing masks. These humanoid sentient beings are native to the planet Doran, which is known for having very low oxygen levels. Considering that Keldors lived on a planet that barely has any oxygen, this gas is toxic to them. This explains why they need to wear breathing masks. And those goggles? They're not there for style either. Keldors need to wear them to keep their eyes from drying out when they're in any other atmosphere aside from Doran. Jedi Master Plo Koon is undoubtedly the most prominent member of his species. He was one of the most respected members of the Jedi High Council during the final days of the Galactic Republic. Master Plo was even one of the most gifted Jedi during this time, being one of the few Jedi capable of using electric judgment, which is a Force lightning variant that didn't turn him into an ugly mess or needing to tap into the dark side. Master Plo, like with most Keldors, was considered unattractive by galactic standards. They have wide, gaping, toothless mouths with tusks jutting out of the sides of their jaws. Think of a Predator in the Predator movie franchise, but not as scary and ugly. Keldors also have dark eyes and hands with only 3 fingers. They also have thick skin that allows them to survive the cold vacuum of space for a while. These people also have quicker reflexes than a regular human because of an extrasensory organ found in their heads. This might be another reason Plo Koon was considered one of the best pilots in the Jedi Order, alongside Anakin Skywalker, that is. Although they may look scary, Keldors are more sophisticated than you'd think. Their people have long been aware of the Force even before they joined the Republic thousands of years ago. They are more Force-sensitive to it than most species, and it's been a big part of their culture and tradition through their Force-sensitive sages. However, the Keldor sages often use their Force powers for weather control. That might explain why Plo Koon can use his version of the Force lightning without succumbing to the dark side. The Kashiri come from a simply purple near-human people who come from the remote wild space planet called Kesh. The Kashiri are so close to human biology that there aren't a lot of differences except their purplish skin and hair. Though there are a few physical differences that tend to be minimal, the Kashiri are even biologically compatible with humans that they can breed. However, the Kashiri were actually isolated from humans for thousands of years. They started off as spiritual and artistic people on their homeworld long before coming into contact with other species. Unfortunately for them, the first people they came across were the Sith, who crashed on Kesh around 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The Sith were worshipped as gods by the Kashiri. However, one of the Kashiri thought that the Sith were a threat, eventually convincing her people that they needed to prepare for an invasion in the future. This forced the Kashiri to switch from being religious and spiritual people to a more martial-oriented race. Due to their isolation, the Kashiri didn't have the technology that the galaxy had, making it almost impossible for them to leave Kesh on their own accord. So, for thousands of years, they remained mostly isolated, developing on their own. The Sith did indeed return more than 5,000 years later, but instead of attacking, this lost Sith tribe accepted the Kashiri into their own as they intermarried with the Sith, creating hybrids that were strong in the Force. The Kashiri also adopted Sith philosophies and values before the Sith tribe invaded the galaxy. Countless Kashiri died during the invasion. 2 of them, Bad Walusari and Ari Ras, were even part of a strike team tasked with hunting down and killing Luke Skywalker. However, they both lost their lives during the mission. While it's not exactly a human-like being, the Kowakian monkey lizard is still considered a sentient species. But it essentially looks like a creature born to heckle you, making it one of the most annoying-looking species in the galaxy. It comes from the jungle world of Kowak, where thick trees and hungry predators keep it fast, sharp, and very noisy. Like a monkey, the Kowakian is small and wiry with long ears, a narrow snout that works like a beak, clever hands, and a tail that helps it balance when it climbs. Its laugh is famous. Meanwhile, many can mimic sounds and bits of speech, which only makes their jokes land harder. Life on Kowak shaped how they act. Wild groups roost high in the canopy and scavenge or hunt for anything they can grab, all while escaping possible land-based predators. They're also very curious but cruel to their prey. Still, they are quick to bolt if things turn bad, considering they aren't built for fights. However, off-worlders trapped them and carried them across the Outer Rim because of their exotic nature. Hutts in particular liked them as living alarms and court fools. A monkey lizard that kept the boss laughing stayed fed and safe, but one that failed risked getting tossed into something bigger as dinner. The most well-known Kowakian is Salacious B. Crumb. He served as Jabba's cackling jester and parasite picker. Another one is Pilf Mukmuk, who ran with the pirate Hondo Ohnaka, snatching valuables and adding laugh tracks to raids. Essentially, outside of Kowakian monkey lizards tend to be companions or pets to gangsters and other scum of the galaxy. The Kyuzo look like skilled warriors straight out of the Mortal Kombat franchise. They're even strong and skilled enough to play the part, and that's because the Kyuzo were naturally predisposed to be strong warriors. Living on the Outer Rim world of Fatrong ultimately turned these people into the galaxy's version of Bruce Lee. This planet has a heavier gravity that forced the Kyuzo to adapt. In turn, they develop strong muscle fibers and fast reflexes. When fighting under lighter gravitational conditions, they tend to be much faster and stronger than most species. On top of being stronger than humans, they also tend to live longer, with older members of the species living over 150 years. But looking at a Kyuzo won't make you think that this species is actually very strong. The Kyuzo are lanky people with wrinkled green skin and yellow eyes. But hiding under that thin frame is a warrior predisposed to be good at hand-to-hand fighting. The twist is that while other species known for their strength tend to be very vicious and violent, the Kyuzo have a strong sense of honor and justice. They value promises about everything else because breaking a promise means tainting their honor. Even bounty hunter members of this species are known for their sense of justice, often ensuring they take on missions honorably instead of playing dirty. Kyuzo warriors are also known for wearing wide-brimmed war helmets. This isn't just a fashion statement because these warriors also use their helmets as shields, and throwing weapons because they're strong enough to withstand blaster bolts or cut through metal. One such Kyuzo warrior is Imbo, who was one of the most successful bounty hunters during the Clone Wars, and the reason that this entire species even came into existence. Let's say you're cosplaying as Yoda but couldn't find green dye. Now, you're essentially a Lannic. These guys come with a standard elf-like look in the sense that they have huge ears. But like Yoda's species, they're short, but not exactly as short as the green little guy himself. They're about 1.2 meters tall, which makes them just as short as your average preschooler. Their ears hang long and droopy, which gives them a distinctive profile right away. Meanwhile, their skin can be blue, orange, purple, red, or green. Their hair and eyes usually match those colors. But the thing about them is that life on their world shaped a tough society. Human and Duros explorers brought high technology to Lannic. That gift split the locals into rival camps over how to use it, leading to crime syndicates taking control when fights broke out. That's why the Republic stepped in to limit the trade that went into the Lannic homeworld. Still, the limits backfired because the planet saw even more off-world tech and corruption. Out of that chaos grew the Red Iaro, a homegrown terrorist movement. By the time of the Empire, the Lannic people were rarely seen away from home. In daily life, the Lannic have a reputation for being brave and fearless. They can be hot-headed and even arrogant. Yet, when the fight starts, they keep clear heads and look for smart solutions. That's why you can see Jedi Master Even Piel always seemingly wearing a scowl. He stands out as the best-known Lannic and even spoke bluntly about how hot-headed his people are. Lasats are basically Wookiees if you strip them of their fur. Might be because they're based on early concept art for Chewbacca. They have large muscular builds, digitigrade legs, and powerful frames that allow them to look like the scariest bouncers in a bar on Coruscant. Meanwhile, their bodies are also covered in short-cut fur, usually a mix of purple, grays, and whites. And to complete the look, they have strong facial features and long ears that make them look like a combination of a gorilla, a mountain goat, and a wrestler. And wrestlers they are, as they have enough brute strength to knock down an entire company of stormtroopers. But under all that muscle, there's a deeply spiritual culture. The Lasats follow the teachings of the Ashla, a mystical energy that resembles the Force, but leans heavily into the ideas of balance and destiny. Many of them believe in prophecy and a spiritual homeland called Lyra San, which is said to be their original homeworld before they moved to Lasan. So, after the Empire nearly destroyed their current homeworld of Lasan by using ion disruptors on civilians, The few surviving Lasats held on to their beliefs, allowing them to finally find this ancient homeworld. A specialty for Lasats were their bow rifles, which were electrocharged melee blaster combo weapons. Only the honor guard of Lasan were said to be allowed to wield these sacred weapons. The most well-known Lasat in the galaxy is Garazeb Aurelios, a former captain of the Lasan Honor Guard before the Empire attacked their planet. For the longest time, he thought he was the only surviving Lasat in the galaxy. He became a member of the Ghost Crew and later joined the Rebel Alliance, even serving after the Battle of Endor. He'll likely appear more in Ahsoka Season 2 or the Mando movie that are coming up. Cal Kestis' master, called Jero Tapal, was also a Lasat, and died heroically defending Cal. Mira Luca were humans born without eyes, instead having vestigial eye sockets. But the most important difference between them and humans is the fact that Mira Lucas are born gifted in the Force, which they use for sight in the stead of their eyes. There aren't a lot of records about the history of the Mira Lucas or where they came from. It is said that they come from a planet that became uninhabitable until they had to move to Alpharides, a moonless world within the Abron system, orbiting the red dwarf called Aber. The problem, however, was that the light emitted by Aber caused mutations that eventually forced the Mira Lucas to evolve without eyes. But because of this, their strength in the Force grew until every member of the species was naturally born strong in the Force. Due to their natural giftedness in the Force, the Mira Lucas leaned heavily into philosophy, introspection, and Force traditions. They were deep thinkers and philosophers, monks and sages who loved to examine the galaxy through the things they saw in the Force. This led them to develop pacifist tendencies, but in most cases, they joined the Jedi Order, where their skills were invaluable. Unlike other Force-sensitive people, the Mira Lucas were special in the sense that their Force sight allowed them to see the Force radiating off of another Force-sensitive individual. They could even use this skill to sense emotions and even deceptions from potential enemies. However, at one point during the Old Republic era, the Mira Lucas suffered a major extinction event on their adopted world, Qatar. Drawn by the powerful Force presence of a gathering of Jedi on this planet, the Sith Lord Darth Nihilus, known for eating planets, consumed all life on the planet through the dark side of the Force, leaving almost everyone on Qatar lifeless. This left the Mira Luca population nearly extinct, forcing them to scatter across the galaxy. One such survivor was Visas Mar, who initially served Darth Nihilus, the very same Sith Lord responsible for destroying her people. However, she eventually turned against him to join the Jedi exile in the fight against the Sith Lords. There's a reason Marillions are often mistaken for humans. They're as close to humans as any other species can get, making them near-human people who share a lot of similarities with their human counterparts. Probably the only difference the naked eye can see is the fact that Marillions have yellowish-green skin. Other than that, it's tough to differentiate them from humans. Physically, though, Marillions are known for being much more flexible than humans. They're agile and quick people who have quicker reflexes. That's why Marillions are excellent martial artists, fighters, and athletes. They can even work part-time as yoga instructors if they want, because they're so flexible and agile. Speaking of yoga, Marillions are also known for their spirituality. They're a serene people who believe in fate and destiny. They value inner peace, discipline, and their connection with the greater cosmic balance. So even if some of them may not be Force-sensitive, they naturally come with the kind of personality and temperament that's perfect for a Jedi. That explains why Force-sensitive Marillions have been key members of the Jedi Order. It's easy to teach peace and discipline to a species that's naturally inclined to be peaceful and disciplined. But if Marillions were to choose a career path other than the Jedi way, their reflexes and quick thinking have allowed them to find suitable opportunities as spies and warriors. Probably the most well-known Marillion in the galaxy is Jedi Master Luminara Unduli, a key member of the Jedi Council during the final days of the Republic. She was known for her unwavering discipline and strict adherence to uphold the values of the Jedi Order's teaching on detachment. Her Padawan, Barriss Offee, who was the same species, wasn't as disciplined as her master, though, because she ended up falling to the dark side temporarily, even becoming an Inquisitor during the Imperial era before defecting and returning to the light side. The Mon Calamari are a noble, proud, and intelligent people known throughout the galaxy for being righteous. Of course, these people also stand out for a lot of reasons. Mon Calamari were fish-like amphibious humanoids known for their salmon-colored, often mottled skin, webbed hands, and large fish-like eyes. They are slightly shorter than humans and other humanoid creatures, with the tallest of their kind being 1.8 meters tall. They also smell of salt and sea, which is exactly what you'd expect from fish people from the planet Dak. Due to their physiology, the Mon Calamari are capable of living deep underwater without any breathing or pressure equipment. They don't even need to decompress when surfacing. In fact, they can stay submerged indefinitely and are right at home underwater. But while they may be fish people to most species, the Mon Calamari are some of the most technologically advanced and civilized species in the galaxy. They're known for their art, science, and creativity. Meanwhile, their tech is so advanced that their ship designs were the standard for the Rebel Alliance during the Rebellion era, and such ships are capable of holding their own against the bigger and more powerful Star Destroyers of the Imperial Navy fleet. The most prominent member of this species is none other than Admiral Akbar, who was one of the top leaders of the rebellion during the Battle of Endor. And now Akbar, please do your best and say the line.
It's not a trap!
Haha, you didn't see that coming. You'd think the Moon are better off on a basketball court to block shots. That's because these humanoids are extremely tall and lanky, capable of reaching heights of close to 8 feet. But while the Moons would have been the perfect players for grabbing rebounds, they aren't exactly athletes. Instead, they're exceptional mathematicians, capable of outwitting a calculator with their gift for numbers. This is why the Moon are known for their incredible financial abilities, which they use to advance their economy on their homeworld of Scipio. Others, however, live on the mineral-rich planet of Moonalinst, which turned into the headquarters of the Intergalactic Banking Clan, a group founded by the Moon. As the heads of the Banking Clan, the Moon are known to be very greedy and cautious when it comes to business. That's why they have a society that's based on merit and intelligence. Only the shrewdest and most intelligent businessmen rise up to the top of Moon society, and in turn the Banking Clan. If not businessmen, some members of this species seek endeavors as financiers, lawyers, and diplomats. However, because the noble families only marry intelligent and successful partners, it is rare for commoners to be born with enough intelligence to rise through Moon society. Due to their intelligence, the Moon rarely engage in direct violence and physical confrontation. Instead, they'd rather hire mercenaries to do their dirty work, which often involves enforcing policies and collecting debts. But there's an exception to that. We're talking, of course, about Darth Plagueis, the Dark Lord of the Sith who secretly orchestrated the events that led to the Clone Wars as the wealthy financier Higo Damask. Plagueis was also the master of none other than Darth Sidious, and part of this famous line.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
The Nautilans were a species native to the planet Glee-Anselm, which is a planet that's mostly water. As such, the Nautilans are known to be amphibious people, capable of living on land and in the sea. Like most amphibious creatures, their colors came in shades of brownish-green, with some slight variations between different individuals. True to their amphibious nature, the Nautilans are an egg-laying species. Basically, they follow the same lifespan as frogs because they start as purely water-based during their youth before developing limbs strong enough to support the weight on land. The Nautilans also develop tendrils on their heads. While mostly useless on land, these tendrils can sense pheromones and the emotional state of other members of their species when they're underwater, dispensing the need for them to communicate through conventional means. They also have 2 hearts, capable of beating separately, allowing them to maximize their stay underwater. Nautilan society and culture, however, aren't too different from human society. They're governed by local families and governments that answer to a central government composed of elders. Meanwhile, their culture promotes lifelong mates, allowing most Nautilans to enjoy monogamous relationships throughout most of their lives. The most famous Nautilan in the galaxy is Jedi Master Kit Fisto, one of the strongest members of the Jedi Order during the final days of the Galactic Republic. Though he was a member of the Jedi High Council, going toe-to-toe and even beating General Grievous in a one-on-one, he was sadly easily killed by Chancellor Palpatine when Windu and the other council members tried to arrest him. Neimoidians are probably the worst people to enter a deal with in the galaxy because instead of brain cells running their brains, they're fueled by credits. These guys have a weird love for profit margins and riches, even if they'd have to make enemies out of half the galaxy just to fill their bank accounts. It's also easy to spot one, so you don't have to worry about mistakenly dealing with one of them. Neimoidians are greenish humanoids with wide lipless mouths, red or bluish eyes, and flat and elongated heads. They're closely related to the Duros, but have less bulbous heads. And unlike the Duros, Neimoidians evolved with a taste for the finest things money can buy. Their love for money is basically part of their culture on their homeworld of Neimoidia, where society is deeply rooted in wealth and status. The bigger your bank account, the more important your social status is. But their love for money was brought about by the harsh environment of their home planet. They realized along the way that being rich was the best way to survive in their homeworld, allowing them to develop a strong survival instinct that focuses on business and trade. This all led to the creation of the Trade Federation, a conglomerate of industrialists and businessmen led by the Neimoidians. While this isn't a political faction, the Trade Federation earned a seat in the Galactic Republic because of its influence in the business sector of the galaxy. Led by Newt Gunray, the Trade Federation allied with the Sith Lord in the hopes of filling their pockets with more credits. This led to the blockade of Naboo and the Clone Wars. Unbeknownst to the Trade Federation, their role in the Clone Wars also paved the way to the rise of the Empire. If you ever wanted to see what happens when you combine witchcraft with the dark side, you'd get the Night Sisters. Take note that they're not a species, instead the Night Sisters are mostly human women from Dathomir who organized as a clan. Some of them interbred with the Zabrak, creating strong and fierce female warriors who also know a thing or two about magic. Night Sister looks vary. In fact, it's not their biology that sets them apart from other species. Instead, they're unique because they channel the Force through their magic, using spells and rituals that create different effects that are far from what the Jedi and even the Sith are used to. The Night Sisters aren't even from the known galaxy. They come from a faraway planet called Peridia, which is said to be the homeworld of their species. However, survival required them to travel halfway across the universe to get to the known galaxy, where they eventually settled on Dathomir, where they created a matriarchal system led by a mother. While they do give birth to males, they are considered second-class citizens, and thralls under the female-dominant Night Sister society. Over time, they became a power on Dathomir and a problem for anyone who crossed them. By the final years of the Republic, they were mixing with bigger galactic players, which brought attention and brutal pushback that shattered much of the clan, though the name and scattered cells lived on. But while the Night Sisters are known for their spells and witchcraft, they're also good fighters. They use bows, blades, and clever traps combined with spells. Still, their true power lies in spells so powerful that they could even make the dead rise. Of course, there are several prominent members of the Night Sister clan. Asajj Ventress, who was born a Night Sister, was trained in the Sith arts as Count Dooku's apprentice and personal assassin. But the most powerful member of this clan in the known galaxy is Mother Talzin, whose power was so great that Palpatine considered her a rival and a real threat to his power as a Sith Lord. Imagine living on a planet suffering from the heat of a red giant throughout your entire life. That's why you can't blame the Nikto for their tough faces and equally tough demeanors. They come from Kintan, which is worse than Tatooine because their red giant twisted them for ages, forcing the Nikto to develop resilient bodies with thick skin. That's why they don't look like the most pleasant people. Many of them even have a natural resistance to heat and toxins. You could also see different looks among them because there are several subspecies shaped by their home climates, like the red desert dwellers and the green coastal people. Unfortunately for them, they also have a history that's tied to the Hutts. Long ago, they entered the Treaty of Vontor, which left generations serving Hutt interest as guards, pilots, and enforcers. You still find plenty of Nikto and Hutt cartels, but not all of them follow that path. Some became traitors, scouts, or warriors for other causes during the great conflicts that shook the galaxy. Of course, their harsh and tough environment also forced Nikto traditions to reflect a culture built on survival and loyalty. Still, some of them actually developed into mild-mannered people. Tarados Gon, for example, was a Jedi Knight during the Clone Wars. Another Nikto Jedi is Fi-X Search. However, a lot of these people ended up turning into gangsters, such as the Kintan Striders gang of Nikto riders, who wreaked havoc throughout Tatooine. Don't laugh at an Ongri when you see one just because they have faces that look like they were flipped upside down. That's naturally how they look, because this amphibious species had to survive the waters of the planet Skustel. That's why their heads taper and carry two flexible eye stalks that let them view things from many angles. Meanwhile, their lipless mouths sit above 4 nostrils, which adds to that inverted look. As for the rest of their body, each hand has 2 thick fingers and an opposable thumb. And while they look a bit hunched and awkward, they're surprisingly agile as muscular people standing at least 1.8 meters tall. As ugly and intimidating as they may look, Ongri society has a calm and diplomatic reputation. Many people think their wide field of vision shapes how they think. Since they can literally see a situation from different angles, they're known for weighing options and keeping cool. That is why many Ongri become skilled negotiators, diplomats, and politicians. But not every Ongri walks the straight path, though, because some have worked with crime lords and gangsters when it suited them. Despite the fact that they're not the most prominent people in the galaxy, Ongri history touches different eras. During the Cold War period, a group of Ongri formed a small cult that worshipped Revan on Nar Shaddaa. Then, around the time of the Clone Wars, 2 Ongri rose to Jedi Master. Pablo Jill fought bravely, while Coleman Kaj later served on the Jedi Council near the end of the Republic. Outside the Jedi Order, Akros Krik ran the Urskru Entertainment District on Coruscant and dipped into criminal dealings. Meanwhile, Gian Dar served as a commander for the Galactic Republic during the Galactic War. Imagine an elephant that ate too many blueberries. That's what an ortolan is. It's basically a bipedal elephant-like species covered in blue fur. Speaking of their fur, this species is often mistaken for having blue skin, but the reality is that ortolans actually dye their fur. The tradition goes back to the time a trader sold them dye. But because ortolans thought dyeing their food was a waste of time, they decided it looked better on their fur instead. Since then, they've been dyeing their fur, often blue. Of course, because ortolans are elephant-like with large trunks, they smell food from 2 kilometers away, and their suction-tipped fingers can even absorb it. A thick layer of blubber keeps them warm on their frigid homeworld of Orto, which is known for having extremely cold temperatures. Due to this, ortolan kids are born with teeth and well-developed muscles, allowing them to survive on their harsh planet. Meanwhile, parents handle schooling and sometimes trade gifted youngsters so they can learn special skills. By 7, most are expected to pull their weight. These people are also known for their friendliness and love for anything peaceful, including music and food. That's why they often become master chefs or standout organists, though their hunger can make them accept bad deals if the meals are good. As peaceful as they may be, their history is tough, as ortolans were often taken advantage of. A shamanic ortolan tribe on Linico 4 was once wiped out during the Great Galactic War. Then, in the Clone Wars, a corrupt minister handed Orto to the Separatists, who enslaved localists to build forts and factories. Jedi Knight Nem Beast led the resistance and dropped the shields in 19 BBY so the clone forces could land. After Order 66, he was killed and Imperial occupation followed. Aside from Bees, Max Rebo is another well-known ortolan. He leads the Max Rebo Band, a well-known musical group during the Imperial era, often playing in Tatooine and other Outer Rim territories. The Paloic from the planet Loic basically skipped arm and leg day because they have very round torsos that come with skinny arms and legs. It also looks like their nose form almost half their entire upper body. This look comes with skin that stays moist and comes in mottled greens, browns, yellows, and blues. Still, their standout feature remains their long, flexible snout with lips at the top. Due to their large noses, the Paloic have very strong lungs. Their air bladder also helps them float or dive when they deflate it, allowing them to have some sort of survival skill when on water. And unlike other species that have tusks, the Paloic are different because they often have tusks during their youth, but eventually lose them as they age. Their society spreads across Loic's equator and follows a feudal setup with ruling families and lots of peasant farmers. Fishing, hunting, and scavenging form most of their daily life. Also, because of their strong lungs, songs and stories are at the heart of Paloic culture. They're also quite traditional, but were not afraid to welcome useful technology as long as it did not trample tradition. As for famous faces, Cy Snoodles led the Max Rebo Band before trying a solo career. She famously had a relationship with Zero the Hutt during the final years of the Galactic Republic. However, that relationship ended on a sour note, with Zero learning that hell hath no fury like a Paloic woman scorned when she shot him. Not much is known about the Paladuvans. After all, they aren't from the known parts of the galaxy. Instead, they come from the wild space planet of Paladuva. Considering that it can be hard to get to and from wild space territories, there aren't a lot of Paladuvans roaming around. But if you look at them, they're clearly near human in terms of their appearance. Basically, what makes them different from regular humans is their chalk-like skin, which gives them a pale appearance of someone who hasn't seen the light of day for months. Their fingers are also on the bonier side, allowing them to draw blood without the use of weapons. Meanwhile, their eyes vary, as some of them have green or red eyes. The thing about Paladuvans is that, as rare as they may be, some of them have popped up in the Star Wars storyline. The most prominent of them is Aurra Sing, a bounty hunter known for her ruthlessness. In the Legends timeline, however, Sing is a hybrid, with her father being Paladuvan. Other than that, there aren't a lot of things known about these people. Not much is recorded about Paladuvan culture. Their traditions, politics, and everyday life are largely unknown. What we do know comes from scattered sightings rather than detailed histories. The Powans are native to the planet Utapau, a world full of sinkholes where they built their cities into. It's also the very same planet where Obi-Wan Kenobi killed General Grievous near the end of the Clone Wars. Appearance-wise, Powans are rather tall, standing at over 6 feet, and are thus taller than most humans. They have gray, pale, wrinkled skin due to the fact that they barely get any sunlight, spending most of their lives living in sinkholes. Their eyes are sunken, surrounded by red eye sockets, and their teeth complete that scary look because, as carnivores, they have sharp fangs. Powans are also known as the Ancients because of their long lifespans. It is said that they could live up to 700 years. But as scary as Powans may look, their society is said to be quite sophisticated and friendly, with their people often looking regal and dressing quite fashionable. They're known for their strong leadership skills, as Powan society is geared toward developing capable leaders who have specific roles in society. Powan cities are governed by different administrators who make the important decisions in the city. Powans are also rarely seen outside Utapau because of the remoteness of their planet. But there are some key Powans who were also key figures outside Utapau. One of them served as a Jedi temple guard during the final days of the Galactic Republic. He later fell to the dark side and got a new job as the Grand Inquisitor of the Empire. He was the leader of Darth Vader's Inquisitorius, a group of dark side Force users tasked with hunting down any surviving Jedi during the time of the Empire. Also, apparently this is also a Powan. Yeah, don't really look like a Powan now, do ya, Humpty Dumpty? Most people think the Hutts are the only crime lords and gangsters in the galaxy, but they're rivaled in power by the Pikes, a humanoid species native to the planet Obadiah. This world is known for its rocky terrain and the Pikes' deep involvement in the galactic spice trade. Obadiah was a drug hub of the galaxy due to their mind-altering spice, which millions in the galaxy were addicted to. Controlling that network was the Pike Syndicate, a massive network of Pikes having an iron grip on that business. Through this monopoly, they were able to amass wealth and a network of criminals and mercenaries in the underworld. On top of that, Pikes were experts at logistics, bribery, smuggling, and all the charming activities that make the galaxy's underworld as interesting as it is. The Pikes had thin, elongated bodies. They came with large, wedge-shaped heads and small eyes. In most cases, they wore breathing masks to protect themselves against the different planetary environments they traveled to. Underneath the masks, their faces look almost skeletal, with narrow mouths and sharp features that make them look like they were carved in granite. In terms of their culture, they tend to be secretive but very organized. Imagine a cult that's mixed with a corporation. That's basically what the entire Pike culture is all about. Their society revolves around their loyalty to the Syndicate, which behaves like a shadow government that operates purely to get to its illegal profits. The most prominent member of the Pike Syndicate during the Clone Wars was Lom Pike, who served as their leader. He also joined Darth Maul's infamous Shadow Collective. They worked alongside the Mandalorians and other crime syndicates in that brief partnership to consolidate more underworld power for the former Sith Lord. If you're a big fan of Dungeons & Dragons, you might mistake a Quarren for a Mind Flayer, and that's because they're both straight out of an H.P. Lovecraft novel in terms of their squid-like appearance. It's also interesting to note that the Quarren are kind of like the cousins of the Mon Calamari in the sense that they share the same homeworld, and like their fish-like cousins, they can breathe both underwater and in the open air. The problem is that the Quarren tend to be on the grumpier side of the family tree. Because of that, the Quarren and the Mon Calamari have been on conflicting sides for as long as anyone on deck could remember. Still, the Quarren are actually misunderstood people, even if they look scary with their squid-like heads, long facial tentacles, and leathery orange or gray skin. They're smart and shrewd people known for being political experts and skilled engineers and mechanics. Despite their long conflict with the Mon Calamari, they're actually more interested in trade than war, even though their stockier build makes them suitable warriors. But as much as the Quarren prefer to fill their pockets with riches rather than to fight battles, their long conflicts with the Mon Calamari have been well documented. They even fought on different sides during the Galactic Civil War, even if they shared the same homeworld. Then, during the Imperial era, the Quarren sided with the Empire, whereas the Mon Calamari were some of the biggest allies the rebels had. They are often mistaken for Kaminoans, but Quirmians are an entirely different species of aliens. These people are native to the planet Jurnus, although they were originally engineered on the planet Kurmaru by a mysterious Arcanian geneticist. Just like Kaminoans, Quirmians are extremely tall, have thin bodies with a long neck and rounded head. In fact, they can grow up to 3 meters tall. But unlike Kaminoans, they have grayish-green skin, and their eyes have brownish-orange pupils. They also have 4 arms, with the other 2 smaller ones often being tucked under their clothes. Interestingly, Quirmians have 2 brains, with one in their head and the other in their chest, just above the lungs. This allows them to multitask with 2 separate processing units working together. Communication among Quirmians is also intriguing. They do so using scent glands in their cheeks, although they're also capable of speaking Galactic Basic Standard, like most species in the galaxy. Meanwhile, thanks to their dual-brain setup and heightened sense of perception, Quirmians are known for being rational and calm geniuses. Most of them turn into scientists and dedicate their lives to science. Though their culture hasn't been thoroughly explored, it can be presumed that Quirmians value intellect and peace due in large part to their status as a genetically engineered species. They aren't known for violence and ferocity, unlike the Mandalorians and Wookiees. The most famous Quirmian is Jedi Master Yarael Poof, who was one of the most highly respected members of the Jedi Order, having a seat on the Jedi High Council during the last days of the Galactic Republic. Interestingly, because they have 2 brains, Quirmians like Yarael Poof are known to be especially proficient in Jedi mind tricks, with their extra brain aiding the primary one. On the Council, Yarael Poof was best known for always bringing pizza for the rest of the Council. He's also one of the only Council members to survive Order 66, that is, if you consider Robot Chicken canon. Though the real reason he was removed from the Council is because George didn't want him to be mixed up with the Kaminoans to avoid confusion. The Rakata were once the most dangerous and influential species in the entire galaxy. Also known as the Builders, the Rakata were native to the planet Lehan. They were tall, hairless, and reptilian fish with sharp teeth and glowing eyes. 33,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Rakata were some of the most advanced people during their time. They were some of the earliest spacefarers, discovering the power of hyperspace travel early, but they also discovered another power, which was the Force. But instead of using the Force for good, they were seduced by the dark side, which turned them into savage people who had a taste for power. Powered by the dark side, they established the Infinite Empire, using the power of their technology and Force-fueled weapons to conquer and enslave planets. Because of that, they were called the Eater of Worlds. Now, this was way before the time of the Jedi and the Sith, which means they were already using the dark side in ways the Sith could have only imagined. At the peak of their reign, the Rakata had enslaved hundreds of worlds and subjugated countless species. Their savagery knew no bounds, as they were even known to even eat other species. But karma eventually struck when their connection to the Force weakened. With their Force connection fading, their technology failed, and their empire saw a steady decline. The cherry on top was a plague that spread through their ranks, leading to their collapse. Weakened, the Rakata couldn't handle revolts and uprisings on their worlds, and the Infinite Empire eventually collapsed. After the collapse of their civilization, the Rakata reverted to a more primitive state, far away from their conqueror ways. They are widely considered extinct, although some of them still live on Lehan, where they live isolated lives away from the galaxy they once conquered. Rhodians hailed from the jungle planet Rhodia, a hot and swampy world covered in greenery. Rhodians are just as green as their homeworld, with a pickled skin. Furthermore, their species came with long tapered snouts, large multifaceted eyes, and fingers that have suction-like tips at the end. They also have bony ridges on their skulls and pointed ears that gave them a buggy yet reptilian look. While they may have googly eyes that aren't that scary, Rhodians are actually one of the more aggressive and competitive species in the galaxy. They're best known for their tracking and hunting skills, which resulted in a lot of them becoming bounty hunters. Their keen eyesight and great sense of smell also give them the advantage over other bounty hunters and mercenaries. Rodians were known as big fans of drama. They have a strong theater tradition in their homeworld, allowing them to show off their dramatic skills. This shift in their society was more recent though, as originally, they used hunting as a way to prove themselves to their fellow Rodians. Over time, mainstream culture in Rodia focused more on creative outlets like theater instead of staying true to their hunting tradition. Still, some Rodians stuck to their roots, becoming scum of the galaxy as bounty hunters. The most famous Rodian in the galaxy is, without a doubt, Greedo. That's the very same guy who tried to shoot Han Solo in the Mos Eisley Cantina for owing Jabba the Hutt a huge sum. Also, a last fun fact about Rodians, they're actually quite smelly compared to other species, often smelling like burnt ozone, which isn't the most pleasant scent there is. Also, their language, Rodese, makes them sound like they're gargling mouthwash. Despite that, most people tend to understand Rodese. These Selkath are the species you'd call if you only needed something, but forget about them when you don't need anything from them. That's basically their history, as this aquatic species was once prominent in the galaxy before everyone forgot about them. These people are native to the planet Manan, an ocean-covered world that forced the Selkath to adapt into water-dwelling people. As such, the Selkath looked like stingrays with arms and feet. They had blue, pink, or green-colored skin, which they developed through generations of surviving in the ocean, allowing them to camouflage for survival. Meanwhile, females are different from males in the sense that they have tendrils on the back of their heads. The Selkath also had retractable claws naturally laced with venom. However, because they're sentient and smart, the Selkath believed that using these claws was dishonorable and primitive, a sign of their madness and reversion to their animalistic ways. That's why they rarely use these claws. At one point in history, especially during the Old Republic, the Selkath were known throughout the galaxy because their planet was the only place where Kolto could be found. Kolto was a liquid known for its healing abilities. So, during the Jedi Civil War, the Selkath had a lot of diplomatic power, using this to their advantage by staying neutral and enriching themselves by selling Kolto. However, when Kolto declined due to the rise of the more favorable Bacta, the Selkath became a forgotten people, isolated from the rest of the galaxy for thousands of years. Still, a few of their people mingled with the rest of the galaxy, like the bounty hunter Mantu, who appeared during the Box episode. Eventually, their people reverted to a more primitive state, making them vulnerable during the time of the Empire when they couldn't match the superior Imperial conquering force. Maybe the legend of the Wolfman was not based on imagination, but was actually a rare Shistavanen sighting. That's because this species is basically a werewolf, complete with bodies covered in dense fur, with long muzzles, sharp fangs, and keen eyes. They move on powerful legs and carry retractable claws that make short work of a climb or a fight. True to their nature as hunters, their hearing and sense of smell are so sharp that a Shistavanen can follow a trail most species would miss in plain sight. Due to their keen senses and natural instincts as hunters, Shistavanen, Scout, and Rangers became famous across the stars for tracking fugitives and finding paths through hostile terrain. Many of them worked as corporate or sector security, while others left home and took jobs as mercenaries, bounty hunters, or rebel scouts. They guarded their system carefully and treated strangers with caution, which helped them keep control of their own affairs. Like actual wolves, Shistavanen culture values the pack above everything. Loyalty to kin and close comrades comes first. Many prefer quiet forests and open plains, and keep traditions that celebrate the hunt. They prize discipline, patience, and the skill to read a landscape. Songs and stories about legendary trackers are common at gatherings, and young Shistavanen learn early to respect elders who can navigate both wilderness and politics. However, there are only a few Shistavanen who became widely known. Probably the most legendary member of this species is Volvif Mon, who fought bravely as a powerful Jedi Master during the Clone Wars. When you think of the word Sith, you'd probably think of evil people swinging around red lightsabers and blasting lightning out of their fingertips. But that's not exactly what the original Sith are, and it all goes back to the actual Sith species who were vital to the rise of the Sith Order and to the long and bloody history between the Jedi and the Sith. The Sith species come from the planet Korriban, one of the most important worlds in the Sith Order's history. They are a humanoid race with bright red skin, bony facial ridges, and glowing yellow eyes that are not unlike Palpatine's eyes when he feels like he has unlimited power. But the thing about them is that they're naturally inclined to be aggressive and warlike people who are proud of their strength. That's why they're very attuned to the dark side of the Force, with all of them having a strong natural affinity to it. In fact, the Sith people are more likely to be born to be sensitive to the Force, instead of Force sensitivity being a rare occurrence among them. Combined with their belief in strength and domination, they used their Force powers to conquer things. This eventually led them to cross paths with the exiled Dark Jedi, who had just lost their fight against the Jedi Order. As the Dark Jedi saw the natural affinity of the Sith people, they subjugated them and, alongside them, formed the Sith Empire on Korriban, teaching them in the ways of the dark side. Some of them even crossbred to create hybrid Sith offspring, such as the legendary Sith Lord Marka Ragnos, who lived more than 5,000 years before the events of the Skywalker saga. The commingling between the Sith and the Dark Jedi eventually turned the word Sith into a label for the entire faction of Dark Jedi who fancy the dark side of the Force. Meanwhile, the real Sith people were eventually called Sith purebloods. However, due to their unending conflicts with the Jedi and their blood becoming less and less pure after thousands of years of breeding with non-purebloods, the Sith species were essentially extinct. Meanwhile, Korriban turned into a ghost town with nothing more than ruined temples that reminded people about the thousands of years of conflict the Sith had with the Jedi. Skakoans are native to Skako, a planet with a heavier atmosphere that only the natives can handle. However, Skakoans can't survive in other atmospheres when they're not wearing these fancy full-body suits. This led to Skakoans rarely leaving their planet. Instead, they stayed on Skako and developed a strong civilization that rivaled Coruscant. Their technological prowess, meanwhile, allowed the Skakoans to form the Techno Union, a powerful guild ran by numerous tech-based firms and corporations. Meanwhile, Skakoans are rarely seen outside their suits, but it is generally believed their biology is based on methane. Their suits are also so bulky that no one knows if they have narrow or big torsos, though it is believed they're on the skinnier side. Meanwhile, they have sensitive and fleshy faces that evolved to fit their planet's atmosphere. Another reason the Skakoans rarely leave their planet is their xenophobic way of living, being basically racist toward other species. Skakoans only leave their planet when they need to. Easily the most recognizable Skakoan was Wat Tambor, foreman of the Techno Union, which was among the first guilds to join the Separatists before the start of the Clone Wars. He was a high-ranking member of the Separatist Council and a constant figure in meetings led by Count Dooku. Tambor wore a heavily modified atmospheric suit and was known for his robotic, clipped voice. Skakoans are native to Skako, a planet with a heavier atmosphere that only the natives can handle. However, Skakoans can't survive in other atmospheres when they're not wearing these fancy full-body suits. This led to Skakoans rarely leaving their planet. Instead, they stayed on Skako and developed a strong civilization that rivaled Coruscant. Their technological prowess, meanwhile, allowed the Skakoans to form the Techno Union, a powerful guild ran by numerous tech-based firms and corporations. Meanwhile, Skakoans are rarely seen outside their suits, but it is generally believed their biology is based on methane. Their suits are also so bulky that no one knows if they have narrow or big torsos, though it is believed they're on the skinnier side. Meanwhile, they have sensitive and fleshy faces that evolved to fit their planet's atmosphere. Another reason the Skakoans rarely leave their planet is their xenophobic way of living, being basically racist toward other species. Skakoans only leave their planet when they need to. Easily the most recognizable Skakoan was Wat Tambor, foreman of the Techno Union, which was among the first guilds to join the Separatists before the start of the Clone Wars. He was a high-ranking member of the Separatist Council and a constant figure in meetings led by Count Dooku. Tambor wore a heavily modified atmospheric suit and was known for his robotic, clipped voice. If you swapped your nose for 8 tubes and dried out your skin, you'd look like a Skrilling. These people are a stocky species hailing from the Machini colony world called Agriworld 2079. Their wrinkled gray skin and deep-set eyes make them look like hardened survivors, and in many ways, they are. Their status as survivors is connected to the breathing tubes that do a lot of work for them. Basically, those allow the Skrillings to sniff for food with them and make a high, carrying whistle when they inhale. They can also spit a mild digestive acid if they're threatened. Meanwhile, their skulls have a bony ridge that hatchlings use to crack their way out of the egg. Most stand around 1.5 to almost 2 meters tall, with 3-fingered hands that clamp down with a vice-like grip, and several rows of sharp teeth built for tearing meat. Skrillings are also egg-laying carnivorous mammals that cannot digest fresh meat. They prefer meat that is rotted for at least a week. To avoid fights over the best cuts, they created a careful sharing system. Off-world, that turned into constant bargaining and requests that outsiders read as begging. As survivors, the Skrillings used to be nomadic herders until the Machini fenced the herds and turned the planet into a vast farm. The colonizers overwhelmed their old ways. Even the word Skrilling began as a Machini insult that meant bone picker. Despite that, some Skrillings stayed and worked for Machini route lines. Many others left home and became scavengers and second-hand merchants, drifting from world to world. They often showed up after battles to strip wrecks. The bleakest among them even ate the dead, which inspired the phrase Skrilling fodder. Notable Skrillings include the weapon smuggler Pote Snitkin and 2 Jedi Masters, Pierce and Ord Innocence. Pierce was slain by Aurra Sing on Coruscant in 30 BBY. The Snivian come from the planet Katamai Prime, which is known for its extremely cold temperatures. As such, the Snivian develop thick skin, wrinkled faces, and broad snouts that all help them survive their tough environment back home. They also have large heads that don't go well with their short and stocky builds. But as ugly as a Snivian may be to most people, they are some of the most artistic people in the galaxy. They went through periods of oppression from different powerful entities throughout their history, but instead of developing aggressive tendencies, they channeled their emotions through their art and writing. It also helped them that they had to spend long periods hiding in caves during the colder days, using such time to further develop their art. But the surprising part about Snivians is that they are aware that they are naturally predisposed to have sociopathic tendencies. That's why they try to memorize that bad trait through selective breeding. In fact, when twin males are born, the other twin usually has the traits of a psychopathic genius. It's not hard to miss a Celestin, especially with those large jowls, wrinkly cheeks, and massive black eyes that make them look like they can see right through your soul. They also have oversized ears that make them stand out. That's why they are the perfect pancake faces. Celestins are known as some of the best pilots and navigators in the galaxy. Their large eyes allow them to see more than most species. Meanwhile, their equally large ears tend to help them stay alert, especially in a heated battle in space. On top of that, Celestins are known to be very hardworking and resilient people. Native to Solust, a volcanic planet with harsh terrain and extreme temperatures, Celestins evolved deep underground, where they develop their large ears and eyes for extrasensory purposes. They're also better at surviving extreme temperatures in comparison to other humanoid species. And since they basically evolved underground, they're great map readers, capable of memorizing routes just by looking at a map once. In terms of their culture, Celestins are actually very eager and open-minded, basically lacking any hint of xenophobia. They like embracing the cultures of other species and don't mind traveling all over the galaxy to explore different sights and sounds. But they are notorious for their practical jokes and shrewd business dealings, making them difficult to work with at times. Still, because of their physical attributes and openness, Celestins were invaluable members of the Rebel Alliance, often working as pilots. Nien Nunb was the most prominent of them because he co-piloted the Millennium Falcon together with Lando Calrissian during the Battle of Endor. And he's still the coolest Battlefront hero we've ever gotten, and you can't change my mind on that. The Tals were considered to be primitive beings who lacked the technology to travel from one star system to another, but in fact they were sentient and proud people who prefer to keep their culture and people far away from the drama of the galaxy. Native to the frozen world of Alzak III, the Tals are large beings covered in white fur that insulates them from their icy environment. They also have 2 pairs of eyes. The smaller ones are used during the glare of daylight, while the larger ones are employed at nighttime or in low-light situations. Their hands and feet are also weapons of their own, equipped with sharp claws that could do tons of damage. And instead of having conventional mouths, they have small proboscis, which they use for feeding and communicating. Culturally, the Tals followed an organized society led by chieftains. They lived simple and primitive lifestyles that focus on hunting and gathering on Alzak III. Despite lacking the technology to travel from one planet to another, they mysteriously found themselves on Orto Plutonia, an icy world found in the Pantora system. Even though they have primitive weapons and tools, their strength and warrior training allowed them to actually go toe-to-toe with the Pantorans in a brief skirmish that killed the former Supreme Chairman of the Pantoran Assembly. Eventually, brokered by the Pantoran Senator Rio Chuchi, peaceful terms were settled between the Pantorans and the Tals inhabitants of Orto Plutonia. It's also not rare for Tals to actually have a gift in the Force. Sometime during the Clone Wars, a Tals named Fal Modama was tasked with protecting the Supreme Chancellor. He sacrificed himself protecting Palpatine when General Grievous was tasked with kidnapping the Chancellor at the end of the Clone Wars. Togorians are literally walking and talking lions. They're big cats that come from the planet Togoria. That said, like typical lions, they're big, muscular, and covered in fur. Of course, they have long claws and sharp teeth that make them look like they were built for the hunt. On top of that, they have keen senses and dense bones that make them exceptional hunters. Basically, they're just like your typical lion, except for the fact that they're intelligent and bipedal. True to their cat-like nature, Togorians are known for being a society of pack-like hunters. However, males and females differ when it comes to this species. Over time, a rift between the two genders grew because males wanted to stay true to their traditional and nomadic lifestyle, while the females were more inclined to build permanent societies. In fact, the way they go about their lives is different. Males rarely left their homeworld, preferring to stay as traditional as possible. Meanwhile, in the hopes of building more permanent settlements, female Togorians were more willing to deal with outsiders and preferred to enjoy luxuries in life. If they could afford it, females even rewarded themselves with vacations away from their homeworld, whereas males were more likely to stay put on their planet. During the Clone Wars, however, Togorians sided with the Separatists and aided General Grievous in the Battle of Togoria. But there were also Togorians who sided with the Republic, specifically the Jedi. That's because an unnamed Togorian Jedi youngling was one of those who escaped Order 66 and survived the early years of the Empire. Then, long after the fall of the Empire, a Togorian named Bixen became a member of the new Jedi Order. Togruta came from the planet Shili, a world rich in greenery and wildlife. It is on this planet that Togruta form tight-knit communities that allow them to be one with nature. True enough, their skin colors and appearances make it obvious that they are nature-loving people. The Togruta are tall people with striped mantras and headtails called laku, which frame their faces in a way that makes them look like royalty. A Togruta's mantral grows as they age. Meanwhile, their skin comes in different shades, such as orange, red, and blue. They often have white facial markings that give them a tribal look, and while you might think their mantrals are just decorations, these are actually helpful because they allow the Togruta to sense ultrasonic frequencies and make them more attuned to movement around them. This is important because the Togruta are known for living in forests with wild animals that are either being hunted or the ones doing the hunting. That's why a Togruta's natural sonar gives them the edge in hunting and survival. Togruta evolved in the wild grasslands of Shili, where they developed strong group-oriented behavior. They aren't the type to go solo because Togruta value cooperation and unity over individualism, and their culture strongly encourages this pack mentality. They believe that the group survives together or not at all, which is why bravery, teamwork, and loyalty are deeply respected traits. Hunting is not just for food, but also a part of their spiritual life and social bonding. In terms of special skills, the Togruta's mantrals make them uniquely suited to combat and stealth. They're faster and more agile than humans and are quite perceptive, with excellent reflexes that allow them to react quickly to movements. Arguably, the most notable Togruta is Ahsoka Tano, a former Jedi Padawan to Anakin Skywalker before she left the Jedi Order. She's known for her more mystical connection to the Force, similar to how the Togruta society works. Another notable member was Shakti, who is most notorious for the most amount of different variations of her death that are depicted in Star Wars. Personally, I found the one where she faces Starkiller the most, though her fight with Grievous in the 2003 cartoon is also just awesome. If you ever wondered what you'd look like with a head too big for your body and no neck to hold it up, think of a Toong. This species comes from Toongal, and they look a little odd to most people. They have long, skinny legs, bulbous bodies, and eyes that sit high on a pointed forehead. Their cheeks hang in jowls, and they can't tuck food into them like a chipmunk. Many assume they evolved from rodents because of that rare and unique skill. Toong behavior tends to surprise outsiders because they're severely nervous around other species and hate confrontation. They often fold when threatened, yet they are not true cowards. They simply feel safe only with immediate family and dread social interaction. Their history is also one of the reasons for their introverted nature. Just as they were beginning to explore their homeworld, they were discovered by the Republic. The appearance of other sentient life shocked them, especially because most of those people had technology far more advanced than their own. This threw the Toong homeworld into chaos, resulting in a world war. It took the intervention of the Jedi to fix things for the Toong. As for the famous faces, the standout is obviously Ben Quadinaros, the biggest legend of the Bonta Eve race. Sadly, his pod racer never started, but he still would go on to compete big in several competitions, and is just the best glub shitto there is. No matter how gifted you are in the Force and how good you are at waving your hand while saying the most convincing lines, you will never change a Toydarian's mind. Toydarians are essentially immune to mental manipulations by the Force, and that's not because they're strong in the Force or have very thick heads that the Force cannot penetrate. Instead, it's more of a fact that Toydarians are so willful that they develop strong minds. Force manipulation, after all, only works on the weak-minded. But while they may be able to resist Jedi mind tricks, Toydarians aren't the most gifted people in terms of their physical attributes. They're small, not even bigger than children, and have long snouts and grump faces. They're also quite stout and stocky. Toydarians barely walk because they'd rather use their small wings to move around. But this biological attribute was a product of their evolution on the planet Toydaria, a swampy world where the Toydarians needed to float around instead of getting their tiny legs stuck in the swamp. Culturally, Toydarians are known for being savvy and shrewd people who are driven by profits. They only speak one language, which is the language of money. As long as the money is on the table, Toydarians are willing to get into the conversation. That's why most Toydarians become traders and merchants. Of course, there's no Toydarian more famous than Watto, the junk dealer from Mos Espa. He, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Darth Sidious have one thing in common, and we're not talking about their power. Instead, we're talking about the fact that they were once masters to Anakin Skywalker, who used to be a slave under Watto before Qui-Gon Jinn bargained for his freedom. So, while Watto did end up losing all his fortune along the way, at least he could brag about once owning Darth Vader. If that's something to brag about, that is. Trandoshan are kinda like space crocodiles walking upright and have an uncontrollable urge to chase and hunt things. As long as something breathes and moves, a Trandoshan will always be there to chase it down. Of course, true to their nature as lizard people, Trandoshans have tough, scaly skin that comes in shades of green and brown. This gives them a natural armor that has proven to be useful in combat. They're also naturally stronger than humans and other humanoid species, making them formidable warriors. Also, similar to lizards, if you chop a limb off a Trandoshan, he's eventually going to grow it back at a slow rate. However, as much as the Republic or even the Empire would have wanted Trandoshans as frontline soldiers due to their ferocity and strength, they have always been hunters by trade. They have a society that's built around their need to hunt in an effort to appease their deity, a cosmic scorekeeper that keeps track of their points when they hunt different species. That's why most Trandoshans follow career paths as slavers, bounty hunters, or mercenaries, hoping these jobs would allow them to hunt as many different people as they need. They'd hunt anything that moves, even Jedi younglings and Padawans. What they do is they often capture different species, leave them stranded on a forested planet, and hunt them down. This happened quite a few times during the Clone Wars, where Padawans were involved, but they also love hunting Wookiees because of their pelts or to enslave them. Bossk is the perfect example of your quintessential Trandoshan. He worked with Boba Fett as a bounty hunter and was one of Han Solo's longtime enemies. Bossk was also among the bounty hunters Darth Vader hired to chase down the Millennium Falcon. I also always found it really cool that his regenerative abilities played into the way he played in Battlefront, where in the 2015 version, he's the only hero who could regenerate health, and in the 2017 version, the only one who could regenerate all the way to full health without needing to get kills. What a cool lizard. Also, look, here's Tuxedo Bossk. It sure must suck not having arms, but that has never bothered the Trotatome, a species that is incredibly unique because their physical attributes don't seem to be similar to any other species in the galaxy. They're more like upright and walking cones or space slugs with sensory antennae and flippers. They're flabby and have round eyelids protecting their eyes, and while they don't have arms, their sensory capabilities allow them to feel the things around them. These people also have a confusing language that's far from the galactic standard, making them very difficult to understand for most people. But they're not a dumb species. In fact, they're intelligent enough to understand the inner workings of starfighters and other mechanical stuff. There aren't a lot of Trototomes in the galaxy, but the most prominent is Cloud, who worked as a mechanic for the Resistance during their conflict with the First Order. The weird part about this is that while he doesn't have any arms, Cloud was described as an effective mechanic who never let his lack of limbs prevent him from doing his job perfectly. If you ever wondered what it's like to share a body with your best friend and your loudest critic, you might think of a Troig. This species is famous for having two heads on one body, with each head having its own mind and voice. They often talk over each other and could even switch languages with ease. They can charm a crowd in stereo or argue with themselves in public. That's why the single Troig needs to practice coordination, making it one of the more unique species in the galaxy. But because two minds are better than one, Troigs are actually quite prominent throughout the galaxy during the Republic era. You see them in busy trade hubs and in the entertainment scene where quick wit is prized. Their two voices make them natural announcers, negotiators, and show hosts. They pop up in the Outer Rim and beyond, working jobs that reward fast banter and sharp observation. They also have simple traditions that help two personalities live as one. Many Troig choose names that combine both heads' given names into a single flow. But because there are two minds working, sometimes it takes a while to make a decision. Major choices are usually made after a patient goes back and forth until both heads agree. As for standout figures, the most famous is Fodesenbeed Anodu. If you watch pod racing, you have heard that name. One head handled the play-by-play in smooth basic, meanwhile the other peppered in hutties and jokes. Tatooine is home to some of the shadiest and nastiest people in the galaxy. Amongst them are the native Sand People, or Tusken Raiders. They're widely known to be highly aggressive and territorial people, savages by the local population on Tatooine. The Tusken Raiders themselves were humanoids that are recognizable by their head-to-toe wrappings that protect them from the twin suns and sandstorms of Tatooine. They rarely show their faces, which were hidden behind masks that come with eye goggles and breathing filters, but they were in fact not humans. Being the first settlers on Tatooine, the Tusken were always nomadic people. They move from one area to another depending on where they can find the right resources. Tatooine's harsh wasteland forced the Sand People to develop different survival instincts, like tracking and hunting. Furthermore, they could survive on minimal water and managed to tame and ride the native banthas for transportation. They also discovered that you could drink water from the black melons that were buried underneath the sand, thus managing to survive without the use of moisture vaporators. Now, coming back to the other inhabitants, regarding them as savage brutes that were primitive and knew nothing more than ambushing anyone near their camp. The truth is that Tuskens also merely tried to survive. After all, they were the original inhabitants of Tatooine before others started conquering their lands and building cities and settlements in their dunes. As they retributed, they got caught up in an endless cycle of fights where the settlers and the Tuskens kept on fighting each other, leaving a sour taste between them. But there were individuals that actually got along just fine with the Tuskens. Tusken Raider society is tribal and deeply rooted in tradition. They have a strict code of behavior and a strong connection to their banthas. In fact, they form lifelong bonds with their banthas. That's why they also won't hesitate to fight anyone looking to steal their beloved animals. Their rituals are passed down orally, and their language consists of grunts and howls that are unintelligible to most outsiders. They're also known to perform rites of passage, and any violation of their customs was sure to be met with retribution. Their gaffy sticks also had a symbolic meaning for them as well, with each of them possessing their own unique weapon which they acquire and build in an initiation ritual. They'd use these sticks as melee weapons to crush people's skulls, or in a more wholesome manner, to brush the bantha's teeth. Tusken also often carried what was called a cycler rifle, which shot a solid physical projectile instead of a blaster shot, which could penetrate shields in the 2015 DICE Battlefront. In the deeper Star Wars lore, one of the more prominent Tusken Raiders is Sharad Hutt. He was a Jedi Knight who adopted the Tusken Raider society as a human. Even though he was a human, Hutt still wore Tusken garb to pay homage to their heritage. Boba Fett in the Disney canon also became an honorary Tusken Raider after living among them and learning their culture. He got his personal gaffy stick out of it. The Twi'lek come from the dry and rocky planet of Ryloth. They had a humanoid appearance, but stood out due to their fleshy head tail called Laku. These were not just for show, as the Laku were actually part of a Twi'lek's brain structure, often used for communication between them. Interestingly, when a Twi'lek's laku is damaged, it can impair the brain function. Meanwhile, their skin can come in a wide range of colors, including green, blue, and red. And because of their smooth skin and beautiful colors, female Twi'leks are often considered exotic and very pretty people by other species, which is why there's a good chance you'd see one dancing in a shady Tatooine cantina. Males also usually had bigger, more defined foreheads than females, which tended to look very natural, just like humans. Culturally, the Twi'lek society is clan-based, and many still follow ancient customs tied to family loyalty and honor. Leadership on Ryloth is handled by a system of clan leaders and a governing body called the Clan Council. But because of economic problems plaguing Ryloth, some Twi'leks don't hesitate to sell their own kind into slavery. There are plenty of notable Twi'leks in the galaxy. One such is Aayla Secura, a blue-skinned Twi'lek who fought as a Jedi general during the Clone Wars and had a, let's say, special relationship with Clone Commander Bly. Another heroic Twi'lek is Hera Syndulla, the daughter of a Ryloth freedom fighter named Cham Syndulla. Hera played a vital role during the rebellion as a member of the Ghost Crew, eventually becoming one of the top military leaders of the New Republic because of her legendary piloting skills. It is interesting to note that Twi'leks and humans are biologically compatible, with Hera Syndulla bearing a hybrid child from her romantic relationship with the human Jedi Knight Kanan Jarrus. Their offspring looks rather human though, except for the green hair color. Also, the most amount of insane fan art of Star Wars aliens seems to involve always Twi'leks for some reason. Tough jobs don't need tough people. Instead, they need Ugnaughts, because these guys are considered the hardest working people in the galaxy. They may be smaller and weaker than most species, but their work ethic is double that of your average 9-to-5 employee. That makes them worth every credit you can pay them. They're willing to do the dirty work and will hardly complain about it. Ugnaughts, however, aren't the most aesthetically pleasing people. They look like walking pigs with their porcine looks and pink skin. Some of them even have tusks, which they use to fight one another to show who's more dominant. Despite that, they are resilient and tough people and a lot stronger than their size makes them seem. They can even live over 200 years, which guarantees more centuries of faithful service for an employer. Native to the planet Ginties, Ugnaughts eventually settled on Bespin, which is now considered their homeworld. Most of them live in Cloud City, which has become their adoptive hometown because Ugnaughts have been settling on it for hundreds of years. This goes all the way back to when Ecclesias Fig, a Corellian industrialist, built Cloud City. He hired countless Ugnaughts, knowing these people work fast and efficiently without complaining about the work hours and the lack of benefits. Eventually, he gifted them part of the lower levels of Cloud City, which the Ugnaughts populated and learned to call home. However, you can find Ugnaughts all over the galaxy because everyone knows how hardworking they are. One such Ugnaught was Quill, who was once a slave under the Empire before retiring as a moisture farmer. Quill formed a good relationship with the Mandalorian bounty hunter Din Djarin before perishing at the hands of some stormtroopers when he tried helping him in Grogu. I genuinely felt so bad when watching that scene. I really loved Quill. What a hero. I have spoken. Dinosaurs can be sentient too. Just ask the Verk, a species native to the swampy and volcanic world of Simbla. Due to their harsh environment, Verks had to adapt, developing leathery green or gray skin and elongated faces with high-set eyes and flat noses, making them look like they were straight out of Jurassic Park. Meanwhile, their heads are stretched into wide, hammerhead-like shapes that make them look strange yet oddly noble. As they've adapted to the environment, Verks have strong and flexible bodies, so while they may look like dinosaurs, they seem to be very regal in their approach. But what makes the Verks so special isn't just their looks, but also their biology and intellect. They're highly intelligent species capable of advanced reasoning, with a strong sense of logic that surpasses most other sentient beings in the galaxy. They are known to assess situations quickly, though that didn't help Jedi Master Coleman Trebor when he made the worst mistake of his life by attacking Count Dooku during the Battle of Geonosis. Nevertheless, they are excellent strategists and negotiators who have a good combination of brains and brawn. Despite their high IQ, Verks are very empathetic people, capable of respecting other life forms. This nature affects the way they interact with others, making them less aggressive. They'd rather go through peaceful negotiations as much as possible instead of entering into a conflict. Culturally, they value peace, patience, tradition, and responsibility above others. That means they don't emphasize conquest or invention because they'd rather focus inward to nurture their families and preserve environmental balance. This is what makes them perfect Jedi. Sporting faces only a mother would love, the Weequay aren't the most pleasant-looking people in the galaxy. These humanoids have leathery, wrinkled skin that's usually a shade of brown or gray. This gives them the appearance of a tomato that's been sun-dried too long. The same grumpy-looking face also makes them look like they're angry at everything, but that's just how their faces are shaped. Of course, they look like that precisely because they come from Sreeler, a harsh desert planet that forced their bodies to adapt without the need for moisturizer. Owing to their hardy physiology, the Weequay are known for their resistance to pain. This is in large part due to their tough skin and years of living in the harsh environments of Sreeler. That's why they're resilient in battle, capable of taking hits that would knock other species into the next star system. Thanks to their resilience, the Weequay are well acquainted with the scum of the underworld, often working as pirates, mercenaries, and bodyguards. If a job involves a lot of punching and kicking, these guys are more than happy to take it, for the right price, of course. Another thing that's weird about these people is that they're very communal in identity. They tie their personal identities to their clan, so a Weequay who's been off-world far too long will eventually lose their sense of identity. On top of that, they don't even use personal names unless they're living away from their people. Among their own, however, they don't call each other by their names. Imagine having a best friend for decades without knowing what their name was. Even though most of them don't use names, the most well-known of the Weequay people actually do. One such example is Sora Bulk, a Jedi Master who turned to the dark side and allied himself with Count Dooku. But the most infamous Weequay in the galaxy is Hondo Ohnaka, who was once one of the most notorious pirates in the underworld. Hondo was known for his self-serving nature and ability to talk himself out of any situation, and always seeing an advantage for himself. He once captured Dooku, Obi-Wan, and Anakin all at the same time. Aside from that, he's just Jack Sparrow in space, and I'm all for it. If you gave a Wookiee a long snout with tusks, you'd get a Whiffid. Like Wookiees, Whiffids are known for their tall, furry, and muscular frames. They come from the ice world of Tula, where blizzards are regular Saturday mornings for them. That's why they look like they were built to handle extremely cold climates. Their fur keeps them warm, while their powerful and massive bodies allow them to haul prey across snowfields. As such, they evolved to become skilled trackers who mastered the art of hunting. They can remain motionless for hours before striking with incredible speed to hunt prey. As a hunting species, Whiffids are considered primitive in the sense that they use traditional crude weapons such as spears. Unlike the Wookiees, they didn't learn to mix traditional lifestyle with technology, opting to stay close to their roots. However, off-worlders pulled some of them into galactic events. That's why a few worked as scouts or bodyguards on distant worlds. Others crossed paths with the Republic and the Empire when travel and trade pushed deeper into the Outer Rim. But through it all, their home remained a hard place where only the prepared lived long. Their exposure to the galaxy is also the reason some Whiffid were able to make names for themselves outside their homeworld. For example, Kukruk was a Jedi Master whose size matched his patience and resilience. Meanwhile, Jaquil worked in Jabba the Hutt's palace as a bodyguard or grunt. If you ever imagined how Bigfoot would look like, your brain surely jumps to the Wookiee. This hairy alien species hails from the forest-covered planet of Kashyyyk, and they're best known for their ability to rip people's arms off. Add to that Wookiees stand over 2 meters tall, but while they're known for their towering size and incredible strength, they're also built for climbing trees, using their long limbs and retractable claws to allow them to do that rather efficiently. They also have long lifespans that allow them to live for centuries at a time. Wookiees may sound primitive because of their deep growls and roars, but this is actually a complex language called Shiriwook, which is almost impossible for humans to say unless they've swallowed a Wookiee hairball. But while humans struggle to speak Shiriwook, a lot of them did actually understand the Wookiee language. Even though Wookiees don't look like it, they are indeed very intelligent. They're gifted engineers and mechanics. That's why Chewbacca is more skilled at fixing the Millennium Falcon than Han Solo himself. Culturally, they are deep-rooted in honor and loyalty, often willing to stick by the side of a person who saved their life because of their life debt tradition. They also value family traditions above everything, having their own rituals and coming-to-age rituals for young Wookiees, where they have to venture into the Shadowlands and survive. That's why, despite being smart and technologically advanced, they live harmoniously with nature, preferring to live in treehouse cities instead of skyscrapers. Also, Wookiees that went against the culture and resorted to violence were usually banished and branded a Mad Claw. Also a side note, Wookiees are known to shed their fur seasonally, which isn't the greatest thing if you happen to be roommates with one, because it's like living with an overgrown dog that requires a really powerful vacuum. A Yarkora is basically what a camel would look like if it were to learn how to walk and talk. They are tall, bipedal mammals with long snouts, wide nostrils, smooth fur, and big three-fingered hands. They also have 2 stomachs and a lot of backup organs like extra kidneys and livers, which help them live for more than 2 centuries. On top of that, they're known for being skilled at reading a room, considering they have sharp eyesight and keen hearing. Their homeworld sits somewhere in the Outer Rim, but no one could pin it down because the Yarkora kept that secret close and usually stayed out of big galactic events. They had no voice in the Republic and were rarely seen in crowds, which gave them an air of mystery. Their traditions also fit that private nature. Courtship could take years and often happened through letters that would be dissected and analyzed until the topic was complete, and another could begin. Aside from that, they preferred living alone, and even married partners often kept separate homes. Because pregnancies were rare and slow, every woman was expected to have at least 1 child, and mothers typically raised the young. You did see Yarkora out in the wider galaxy, usually where information, credits, or risk were involved. Some helped the Rebel Alliance with counter-espionage, while others carried messages for the Empire. One such personality is Sailt Marae. Meanwhile, others worked as scouts or farmers and showed up more often after the New Republic took shape. No one knows what they're called or where they're from, but most people refer to them as Yoda's species, named after, of course, Jedi Grandmaster Yoda, the most prominent member of this group. Yoda's species is unique, even when compared to the various species of creatures and sentient beings in the known galaxy. They're small, rarely taller than the average human's knee, but their species is naturally incredibly powerful in the Force, often far stronger than the average Force-sensitive individual. Yoda, for example, had the highest midichlorian count among all Jedi, except for Anakin Skywalker during the last days of the final days of the Republic. Due to their exceptional potential in the Force, there's a theory that the Force itself keeps the location of their homeworld a secret out of fear that they may end up getting exploited by the Sith or ill-willed beings. On top of their small size and giftedness in the Force, Yoda species are long-lived beings that are known to survive for over 900 years. They age differently from most species, with 50-year-old members of their species still looking and acting like toddlers. Looking at you, baby Yoda. Some other known members of Yoda species were Yaddle, the only known female of the species, Master Vandar, who was active during the Jedi Civil War in the Old Republic, and of course, Grogu, Disney's favorite marketing tool. I can't really blame him though. Grogu does look friggin' adorable. His role also single-handedly made The Mandalorian show as intriguing as it is for me in the first 2 seasons. Thus, he's definitely a big W for me. Forget the Empire, because a new group of bad guys called the Yuuzhan Vong immediately entered the picture during the New Republic era to wreak havoc throughout the galaxy. And they are a lot scarier and more vicious than Darth Vader and the Emperor combined, making them some of the worst species to ever enter the galaxy. The Yuuzhan Vong are extragalactic people, which means they come from a galaxy that's well outside the known galaxy. These people come from the planet Yuuzhan Tar, where they evolved into hideous people. They aren't very different from humans in terms of their biology, however they are taller, heavier, and have less hair on their heads. This gives them a savage and sinister look that could only be matched by their actual viciousness. What makes them stand out is that they absolutely despise anything mechanical, which is odd because they have the technology to travel from one galaxy to another. But instead of using mechanical technology, the Vong rely on biotechnology powered by purely organic matter. This practice is tied to their religion, which taught them that mechanical technology is blasphemy. On top of that, the Vong have a taste for masochism. They graft organic matter onto their bodies, believing this is a rite of passage that makes them stronger or cooler. Some of them even wear living armor and use serpentine weapons that are basically grafted onto their bodies. This is because their culture was built on pain, war, and absolute devotion to the true gods, which require them to inflict pain on themselves and everyone as a form of worship. If that wasn't scary enough, the Yuuzhan Vong were impossible to detect using the Force, being mostly disconnected from it, which confused the Jedi a lot at first. However, they are susceptible to some Force-based attacks, which means they aren't entirely immune to the Jedi's powers. The Vong set the galaxy into one of the most devastating wars and conquered most of the known galaxy before eventually being fought off and back into their galaxy. They may look like walking yarn balls, but the Yuuzhan aren't always the friendliest fluffballs in the galaxy. While they may not look sentient, they actually are. And the thing about them is that they are very enthusiastic and sometimes even annoyingly loud, even if they do look cute. The Yuuzhan come from the forest moon of Endor, which is also home to another cute and fluffy sentient being you might be more familiar with. They are furry bipeds with round bodies perched on long, thin legs. Their arms are long, their eyes are small, and their mouths are oversized with lots of sharp teeth, but they're loud by nature and famous for voices that carry over great distances. That same voice makes them natural singers with a big range. Out on Endor, Yuuzhan live in small tribal groups that move with the seasons. They hunt and forage and use simple tools. Music is one of the most important parts of their culture. They sing to celebrate a hunt and to tell stories about their ancestors. Meanwhile, courtship often involves public singing that shows off breath control and pitch. As for their education, elders teach the young through songs and spoken tales, which helps when your people roam the plains. Yuuzhan history is mostly local to Endor. They share the moon with other native peoples and kept to their hunting grounds. As explorers, traders, and slavers poked around Endor, some Yuuzhan ended up off-world. Their looks made them stand out, and their voices made them marketable. A few found steady work in clubs and traveling shows, others had a harder time and were pulled into rougher corners of the galaxy. That's why Yuuzhan like Joe Yoza, whom you'll better know as the guy who screams at you during the music scene in Jabba's palace, found a job within the Max Rebo band. Whether or not hell exists in the galaxy far, far away is still unknown. But if it doesn't, then Zabraks are probably the closest depiction the galaxy has to demons. They were humanoids with horned heads and tattooed faces. Zabraks mainly come from the world of Iridonia, although some of them did also have colonies on other worlds, like the one on Dathomir. Still, Iridonia remains the heart of their civilization and culture. Because Iridonia is no vacation spot for an intergalactic tourist, Zabraks are known for being very resilient and unusually hardy. They can withstand tough, dry desert environments of Iridonia and also had to deal with the carnivorous Anubas that were native to their planet. Their natural resistance to pain is one of the things that makes them special, allowing them to live in tough places through sheer grit and willpower. They also possessed a second heart, allowing them to have more stamina than the average human when under stress. In terms of their culture, Zabraks take pride in being independent and strong-willed. They don't like taking orders from anybody, which makes them fierce warriors. Their society also values personal strength, honor, and mental discipline. That's why plenty of Zabraks in the galaxy find employment as bodyguards, mercenaries, or even Jedi. They don't necessarily lean toward good or evil, because they just want to be the best at whatever they choose to do. As far as good guys are concerned, Jedi Masters Eth Koth and Agan Kolar are prominent members of the Zabrak species. However, there are also two Zabraks that are far better known. The Sith Lord Darth Maul and his brother Savage Opress are both Dathomirian Zabraks who were bred and raised by Dathomirian witches on Dathomir. Unlike the Zabraks on Iridonia, Dathomirian Zabraks tend to be more aggressive because they were bred to be warriors. What's interesting about the Zabraks is that their face markings are actually tattoos instead of natural patterns they were born with. They tattoo those marks on their faces as they grow up, with each tattoo symbolizing the journey that the individual Zabrak went through. Meanwhile, their horn pattern is unique, similar to how unique all humans' fingerprints are. Zeltrons are considered extremely attractive by galactic standards, even if they do have a skin color you only see on strawberries. They're also basically very human in the sense that almost all of their traits are human, except for a few things, including their skin color. Other than being pink, Zeltrons also have the ability to release pheromones that can turn them from a 10 into a 100 on the hotness scale. But the thing about these people is that they're hedonistic, which means they value pleasure above everything. Their culture valued erotic expressions and the pursuit of pleasure, often spending time seducing people or hanging out in cantinas. Speaking of cantinas, they also have 2 livers. So forget about out drinking a Zeltron at the bar, because there's a good chance she'll send you to an alcohol poisoning while she's had twice as many shots as you have. They also didn't care about common gender dynamics because they're quite easygoing and liberated, even if everyone around them thinks they're just hoeing around. But for Zeltrons, having very limited personal and erotic boundaries is simply a part of their culture. Due to their attractiveness and erotic nature, Zeltrons were often involved with criminal organizations. They were often used as spies, as they also had mild telepathic abilities that could influence the decisions of others while sensing their emotions. Zeltrons also make good hosts and diplomats due to their persuasive nature. House cats look like royals who treat us like they're slaves. Well, that's essentially what a Zygerian does. The Zygerian is a cat-like species from Zygeria, a hot world that once pulsed with slave markets. They look mostly human at a glance, but their pointed ears, sharp features, and predatory poise give them away. Many wear their hair long and styled, and they move with a confident, almost stalking grace. They favor gear that asserts control, like shock whips and slaving collars. Zygerian society prizes hierarchy. A monarch sits at the top, supported by ministers and guilds that regulate the trade. Status is shown in rich garments, ornate jewelry, and the public rituals of auctions. Mercy is seen as weakness, while obedience and profit are praised. Meanwhile, their history turns on power and profit. Long ago, they built a slaving empire that enriched their court. The Jedi and the Republic broke it, and resentment simmered, with the Zygerians developing a deep hatred for the Republic. During the Clone Wars, they tried to bring it back by allying with the Separatists. As such, they kidnapped entire communities and ran processing centers, such as the one on Kadavo. The plan fell apart when Jedi strikes and Separatist double-dealing toppled their queen and scattered their network. The most standout member of this species is Queen Mirage Centel, who led them during the Clone Wars as the Zygerians sought to restore their slaving empire. However, Anakin Skywalker, a former slave himself, led the charge against the downfall of Queen Mirage's slaving schemes.